Chapter 9:17. The Sealed Sword Path. Tian had thought that it would be a mysterious world. He hadn't thought that it would be a gigantic light sword. Tian sensed an immense, majestic, ancient, and forceful aura filling the air as the huge sword hovered in the air. Vaguely, there seemed to be an indomitable giant wielding a giant sword that was about to split the entire sky. "All right," Lin Feng nodded solemnly. His eyes were filled with longing. It was the second time he had seen the sealed sword path. He could sense the vast and mighty sword qi which filled the air. His heart was pounding. The first time Lin Feng had seen the sealed sword path, he had been 6 years old. He had been an orphan who had been brought to Celestial Sword Pavilion by Yin Nanfei. Yin Nanfei had been Lin Feng's teacher, and he had been a genius of Celestial Sword Pavilion. Unfortunately, Yin Nanfei had challenged the sealed sword path and had failed. His sword heart had been sealed and he had died. From that day onwards, Lin Feng had considered the sealed sword path as an obstacle in his path of cultivation. He had to go through it, not only for himself, but also for his teacher who had died. Now that he was seeing the sealed sword path again, Lin Feng's heart was pounding. The sealed sword path had opened again. It had astonished the entire Celestial Sword Pavilion. After a short time, a large number of people had gathered outside the Celestial Sword Palace. The sealed sword path, it's really the sealed sword path. It's surprisingly open again. Could it be that someone wants to go through the sealed sword path again? In the thousands of years since the founding of Celestial Sword Pavilion, nobody has ever gone through the sealed sword path. How many genius swordsmen have had their sword hearts sealed? Who would be so daring to go through the sealed sword path again? Indeed, without the sealed sword path, Celestial Sword Pavilion would be many times stronger than it is now. The crowd was discussing among themselves. Very quickly, some people noticed Lin Feng and they looked at him in a strange way. Even though Lin Feng didn't show his face many times in Celestial Sword Pavilion, some people still recognized him. They immediately guessed what was going on. Is he going to go through the sealed sword path? Finally, someone couldn't help but be curious. It must be him. Back then, his teacher was destroyed on the path of sealing swords. Now, he wants to repeat his teacher's footsteps. Tell me why bother? Someone couldn't help but sigh. That's not necessarily true. The ancestor said that Sword Fanatic is the best sword cultivator in Celestial Sword Pavilion in 1,000 years. Maybe he really will be able to seal his swords, said some people who were confident in Lin Feng. Lin Feng turned a deaf ear to those words. He was blankly staring at the sealed sword path. He looked like he was in a daze. Tian calmed down and asked, "Brother Lin, is it true that anyone can leave?" "Yes," replied Lin Feng. Immediately after, he realized something and was stupefied. He looked at Tian and said, "Tian, brother, the sword sealing path is extremely dangerous. You don't need to take risks." "I want to try." Tian smiled faintly. There was no fear in his eyes. "Brother Nya, the sealed sword path is a taboo in Celestial Sword Pavilion. For thousands of years, nobody has been able to pass it," said Lin Feng when he saw that Tian didn't seem to be joking. "My teacher's sword heart was sealed. I don't want you to. What about you?" Without waiting for Lin Feng to finish, Tian suddenly asked. Lin Feng didn't know what to say. The sealed sword path was extremely dangerous, but if he could do it, why couldn't Tian? "Do you really want to leave?" Lin Feng looked at Tian solemnly and asked in a deep voice. "Yes." Tian nodded indifferently. He looked extremely confident. The more dangerous the sealed sword path was, the more attractive it was for him. After a short time, Jean de Bayo and the others arrived. "What the hell is that?" Jean de Bayo looked at the gigantic sword in the sky and couldn't help but curse. "Path of sealed swords." Lu Shan cried out in surprise, her little face lifeless. Tian didn't have time to pay attention to them. He carefully sensed the sealed sword path. He didn't know why, but he had a very strange feeling. "Corpse Luo, what did you feel?" Tian wasn't sure of his guess, so he asked Corpse Luo. Corpse Luo had been busy making soul slaves. When he heard Tian's voice, he came out of the furnace of hell. When he saw the sealed sword path, his expression froze. "Master, it seems like..." After a long time, Corpse Luo said with a trembling voice, as if he couldn't believe his own judgment. An illusion? Yes. Nietian nodded. He had the feeling that the sealed sword path was an illusion, but he wasn't sure. Corpse Luo was a rank 6 illusionist. He knew more about illusions than Nietian. If he also thought that the sealed sword path was an illusion, then he was most likely right. Nietian was shocked. He didn't think that the sealed sword path was more terrifying than he had imagined. It seemed to be an illusion created by a swordsman using sword chi. The person who could do this was definitely in existence beyond the god realm. Inky Jade Dragon Sword. At this moment, Enai Jiaming suddenly spoke. He looked at the sealed sword path with a dumbfounded expression. Huh? Nietian was slightly stunned. He turned to look at Enai Jiaming and asked in surprise, "What did you say?" Enai Jiaming came back to his senses. He frowned and said with an ugly expression, "I think I've seen this sword before. It's the Inky Jade Dragon Sword." Inky Jade Dragon Sword? Nietian and the others were all stunned. The surrounding people also looked at Enai Jiaming with a strange expression. The sealed sword path had existed in Sky Sword Pavilion for thousands of years. Could Enai Jiaming be an old monster who had lived for thousands of years? Nietian didn't care about the others. He stared straight at Enai Jiaming and asked solemnly, "Jiaming, are you sure this is the Inky Jade Dragon Sword?" Enai Jiaming was the reincarnation of the Xianlong Beast Saint. If he had seen the Inky Jade Dragon Sword in his previous life, it wouldn't be strange for him to recall something. Yes. Enai Jiaming nodded and said, "I don't remember when I saw it, but I really saw it. I believe you, but don't think about this sword now." Nietian nodded and said to Enai Zichun, "Zichun, you guys leave first." All right. Enai Zichun obviously understood what Nietian meant. He was afraid that Enai Jiaming would recall something and directly recall his previous life's memories. That would be terrible. Enai Jiaming felt dizzy and followed Enai Zichun back. "Brother Nya, is your friend okay?" Lin Feng had seen everything that had just happened. He felt very strange and couldn't help but ask. "He's fine." Nietian nodded slightly, but the way he looked at the sealed sword path changed. He believed Enai Jiaming's words. The sealed sword path was indeed a sword, but this sword was definitely not the original body, but a clone. Yes, it was a clone of a sword. Nietian was very sure that the Inky Jade Dragon Sword was the same as the Star Soul Tablet, the three-legged mysterious cauldron, and Enai Jiaming's mysterious dragon castle. Chapter 918. Nietian looked up at the huge sword of light in the sky and sensed the vast, ancient power, and his eyes became slightly blurred. The world was much larger than he had imagined. Apart from the godly area of the heaven world, there was definitely a higher world. The Inky Rain Dragon Sword is such a terrifying weapon, thought Nietian. The clone of the Inky Rain Dragon Sword could surprisingly create an illusion. That illusion was extremely strange. He couldn't tell what level it was. A clone was already so powerful. It was hard to imagine how powerful the Inky Rain Dragon Sword itself was. And what kind of person had created the Inky Rain Dragon Sword? Nietian had so many questions in his head that he couldn't calm down. It turned out that the world he knew was still too narrow. The real world was far vaster than he had imagined. "Brother Nya, are you all right?" asked Lin Feng when he sensed Nietian's emotions. He thought that Nietian was worried about entering the sealed sword's path. "I'm fine," said Nietian while shaking his head. No matter what, he had to enter the sealed sword's path. It was too tempting. "Nietian, don't tell me you're going to walk the path of sword sealing." Lushan's face stiffened as she asked in surprise. "Nietian, don't tell me you're going to walk the path of sword sealing." Nietian nodded and said, "Lin Feng and I are going to enter the sealed sword's path together." "Both of you want to die?" said Lushan speechlessly while looking at Nietian and Lin Feng. Nietian was speechless. That little girl was really eloquent. After a short moment, a silhouette appeared in the sky. It was Lil Lingyun. Lil Lingyun glanced at the crowd and quickly looked at Lin Feng. He then said, "Lin Feng, have you made up your mind?" He wanted to give Lin Feng a chance. After all, Lin Feng was a genius of Celestial Sword Pavilion. "I made up my mind," said Lin Feng indifferently. Immediately after, he looked at Nie Tian and said, Your Excellency, Nie Tian wants to enter the sealed sword's path with me. Is that okay? Although the rules of Sky Sword Pavilion stated that the path of sealed swords could be open to anyone, Nie Tian was still an outsider. Furthermore, he had some unresolved conflicts with Sky Sword Pavilion, so he had to ask Li Lingyun first. Li Lingyun was taken aback at first, but then his gaze fell on Nie Tian and he asked, You also want to walk the path of sealed swords? Nie Tian didn't explain anything and just nodded. At this moment, everyone's gazes immediately shot over, and their faces were filled with disdain. Who is this guy? He wants to walk the path of sealing swords with just his strength at the second level of the sky human realm? He's just courting death. Who knows who he is? He's probably a small fry that came from somewhere and wants to join in the fun. The sword maniac is a genius in the way of the sword, so there's still a slight chance for him to walk the path of sealing swords. This guy is just a piece of trash, so why bother to throw his life away? The discussions of the crowd were getting more and more unpleasant. Nie Tian listened to these words with an indifferent expression. His mood did not fluctuate in the slightest. There was no need to get angry with a bunch of idiots. Of course you can. Li Lingyun was staring at Nie Tian in a gloomy way. He looked proud of himself. He didn't have any confidence in Lin Feng, so he didn't have any confidence in Nie Tian at all. If Nie Tian's sword heart was sealed by the path of sealing swords, that would be the best outcome for Li Lingyun. Nie Tian smiled faintly as he prepared himself. All right, you can start now. Li Lingyun didn't waste any time and immediately said, Wait. At that moment, a voice abruptly spread through the atmosphere. Immediately after, a silhouette appeared in the sky and landed in the air. That silhouette was coldly staring at Lin Feng and said, Lin Feng, before you enter the path of sealing swords, let's fight. Boom! As the domineering voice fell, a sharp aura blossomed in the air, bombarding the ground from afar, and a deep pit was blasted in the bluestone floor dozens of meters away. How arrogant! The crowd raised their heads and looked over. There was a man holding a long spear in the air. His chi was extremely powerful and domineering. Nangongba! Nie Tian looked at the man's face and was stupefied. At that moment, that guy had come over and interfered. He was simply causing trouble. Who do you think you are? How dare you challenge Sword Fanatic? At that moment, a furious voice spread through the air. A sword cultivator from Heaven Sword Pavilion rose up in the air. He was extremely fast and moved like a sharp sword towards Nangongba. However, that person came back even faster. Boom! Nangongba didn't even look at him. He pointed his spear at that person, and a muffled sound spread through the air. That person was sent flying and smashed into the ground, creating a deep crater. The crowd gasped. That person was a cultivator of the first celestial realm, but he couldn't even withstand a single attack from that person. That person's strength was terrifying. I won't kill you this time, but if anyone dares to challenge me again, they will definitely die. Nangongba's silhouette was as sharp as a spear. His cold and domineering voice spread through the air. Who is this guy? How dare he come to the Sky Sword Pavilion alone? The eyes of the crowd trembled as they murmured, Are you Nangongba? At this moment, Lin Feng finally spoke. He had already heard that there was a cultivator called Nangongba who had come from the godly martial palace to the Sky Sword Pavilion to challenge him. It seemed that the person in front of him was Nangongba. Nangongba, whispered the crowd. Nangongba, one of the 6 evils, a member of the godly martial palace. No wonder he is so arrogant. Nangongba was extremely strong, and he had the support of the godly martial palace. Of course, he could be arrogant. I'm Nangongba, shouted Nangongba while staring at Lin Feng. He then shouted, Lin Feng, do you dare fight against me? Nangongbaji was arrogant and aggressive. Nangongba is one of the 6 evils, and Jinshi is one of the 3 kings. He's much stronger than Nangongba. Why is he so arrogant? Said the people of Heaven's Sword Pavilion. But Lin Feng looked indifferent. He raised his head and looked at Nangongba. He then said calmly, Nangong Ba, you can leave. I only accept challenges from sword cultivators. You are not a sword cultivator, so I won't fight against you. His voice was flat, but it carried a wisp of resolution. Are you scared? Said Nangong Ba, smiling coldly. He looked like he was making fun of Lin Feng. Whatever you say, said Lin Feng indifferently. He didn't accept challenges from people who were not sword cultivators. That was a rule that his teacher, Yin Nan Fei, had made before he died. Lin Feng didn't know why Yin Nan Fei had made such a strange rule, but he didn't care. He had to obey his teacher's words. Nangong Ba's face turned extremely gloomy, his body emitting an overbearing, murderous intent. Lin Feng, are you the same as Yin Nan Fei in the past? Are you a coward? Said Nangong Ba suddenly with an evil smile on his face. When Nangong Ba said that, everybody from Heaven Sword Pavilion was astonished. Their eyes widened. Everybody knew that Yin Nan Fei's name was a taboo for Lin Feng. Nobody was allowed to mention his name. Chapter 919. When Lin Feng heard Nangong Ba humiliating his teacher, his facial expression suddenly became ice cold. He released a terrifying, deadly energy, which was extremely aggressive. He didn't care how Nangong Ba provoked him, but if he insulted his teacher, Lin Feng wouldn't allow it. Nangong Ba. Lin Feng shouted the person's name one word at a time. He looked glum and said in an ice-cold tone, How do you know my teacher's name? The crowd looked at Lin Feng and sensed his killing intent. They knew that things weren't going to end well. How do you know? Nangong Ba laughed coldly and said, Yin Nan Fei framed my father back then. Didn't he tell you? Yeah. Lin Feng was surprised. He didn't understand what Nangong Ba meant. Oh, I understand. How could Yin Nan Fei say that he did such a despicable thing? He didn't dare fight to the death against my father, so he hid in Celestial Sword Pavilion. Now that he's dead, you'll pay for what he did, shouted Nangong Ba loudly. He didn't look scared at all, only deadly energies. Nye Tian looked at them and gradually understood what was going on. It seemed like Nangong Ba's father and Lin Feng's teacher were enemies. Nangong Ba didn't just challenge Lin Feng. He wanted to avenge his father. But Lin Feng didn't seem to know anything about what had happened. Bullshit. Lin Feng was stupefied. Immediately after, he shouted furiously, My teacher is an upright person. Don't you dare slander him. When he finished talking, Lin Feng's silhouette rose up in the air and sword energy emerged from his body. When everyone saw this, their eyes couldn't help but tremble. Their eyes actually became slightly heated. Lin Feng and Nangong Ba were both at the top of the young generation in the world. Their battle was going to be spectacular. Nye Tian's eyes twinkled. He also wanted to know who was stronger between Lin Feng and Nangong Ba. So far, Lin Feng had shown that he was stronger than Nangong Ba. But Nye Tian knew that Nangong Ba hadn't used his Kirin blood yet, so the result of the battle was still uncertain. Liling Yun watched from the side. He seemed to know some things from back then, and had no intention of interfering. Lin Feng and Nangong Ba were both young cultivators. The battle between them was fair. If Liling Yun interfered, it would be bullying. The Divine Martial Palace behind Nangong Ba would definitely not agree to it. Very good, said Nangong Ba, while looking at Lin Feng in an evil way. He then laughed insanely and said, As expected, a shameless teacher and disciple. Let's fight. Don't insult my teacher. Nangong Ba was humiliating Yin Nan Fei again. Lin Feng was furious. He shouted furiously, and his dragon sword pierced through the air. The dragon roar was piercing through the air. Many people felt their ears buzzing and couldn't help but cover their ears. Boom! Lin Feng attacked first. His sword chi streaked across the sky towards Nangong Ba. The sword chi whistled, like a sharp blade cutting through heaven and earth, and an ear-piercing explosion rang out in the void. You've broken through to the 5th Tian level, and you've broken through to the very top of the sword spirit. Lin Feng, you didn't disappoint me. Nangong Ba didn't fear Lin Feng at all. He laughed insanely and raised his 9 Overlord spear high up in the air. A crescent moon-shaped fire appeared, and the atmosphere rumbled. Boom! The first attack collided, and a muffled sound spread in the air. Both silhouettes were pushed back, and they both stabilized their bodies. "They're so strong," thought the crowd. Lin Feng and Nan Gongba were extremely strong. They were equally matched. Nie Tian frowned. Nan Gongba was weaker than Lin Feng, and his cultivation level wasn't as high as Lin Feng's. Surprisingly, he was evenly matched with Lin Feng. That was strange. While they were surprised, the two silhouettes exchanged a few more attacks in the air. They were equally matched. The crowd couldn't see them anymore. They could only see sword lights and spear silhouettes twinkling in the sky. Very quickly, Nie Tian understood something. It seemed like Nan Gongba's 9 Overlord Spear could suppress Lin Feng's Dragon Sword. Lin Feng couldn't use his full strength. Nie Tian thought for a few seconds and understood. Since Nan Gongba knew that Lin Feng was his enemy, he must have prepared for it. His 9 Overlord Spear must have been specially trained to fight against Lin Feng. Lin Feng, didn't Yin Nan Fei tell you that the 9 Overlord Spear is the nemesis of the Dragon Sword? Shouted Nan Gongba furiously. Suddenly, a scorching fire appeared behind him, and his spear energy increased to the maximum. Murderous sounds of spear humming resounded. The surging flames were like long snakes, connecting together in the sky and filling the air into a sea of fire. Thousands of fire snakes were like tentacles, covering the sky and covering the earth as they surged over. As expected, the 9 Overlord Spear is the nemesis of the Dragon Sword. Nie Tian's eyes twinkled. Nan Gongba was going to use his Kirin blood. That wasn't a good thing for Lin Feng. Nie Tian had already fought against Nan Gongba, so he knew how strong Nan Gongba was. If he used his Kirin blood, even Nie Tian would have to use his stars to fight against Nan Gongba. Lin Feng was being oppressed by Nan Gongba. The situation was getting worse and worse for him. Lin Feng's silhouette was floating in the air. His forehead was covered in sweat. The 9 Overlord Spear was suppressing his Dragon Chant Sword. It was almost as if it was being suppressed. Lin Feng couldn't use his full strength. Li Lingyan also noticed that something was wrong. He looked worried, but most people didn't know what was going on. They were all looking at Lin Feng in a strange way. They thought that Lin Feng was a sword fanatic, but he didn't live up to his name. "Lin Feng died," shouted Nan Gongba furiously. Fire condensed in the sky, and a fire Kirin appeared. The earth and sky started shaking. 1,000 meters long fire Kirin appeared, and the sky turned into a sea of fire. The fire looked like sharp claws and moved towards Lin Feng. Upon seeing this, Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. It seemed like the power that Nan Gongba had displayed was stronger than the day before. Therefore, Lin Feng was in danger. Nie Tian's gaze trembled while his expression tensed to the extreme, and he was already prepared to make a move. Lin Feng was a genius. It would be a pity if he died in Nan Gongba's hands. Everyone's eyes were tense as they stared at the scene in the sky. They did not even dare to breathe too loudly. Lin Feng was standing in the air. That boundless fire was releasing a strange strength, which was suppressing Lin Feng's sword chi. Even his pure meridians were being affected. He couldn't use his full strength. At the moment of life and death, Lin Feng closed his eyes and entered into a mysterious state of mind. It seemed like everything around him didn't exist anymore. There was only him and his sword in the world. In Lin Feng's godly awareness, he could see that he was in the middle of a calm lake. He lightly stepped on the surface of the lake, and his voice resonated in Lin Feng's ears. "What is Lin Feng doing?" shouted the crowd when they saw that Lin Feng wasn't moving. They thought that he had given up. Chapter 9:20. When Nie Tian sensed Lin Feng's sword intent, he realized that Lin Feng was about to break through to the next level. Lin Feng's sword spirit had already reached the top of the sword level, so it was normal for him to break through to the next level. At that moment, Lin Feng suddenly opened his eyes. In the next moment, the Dragon Cry sword suddenly appeared, as if it had been reborn, shining with a different kind of light. "Dragon Chant," said Lin Feng indifferently. His Dragon Chant sword rose up in the air. There was no mighty sword intent, no dazzling sword light, only a chilling light that tore through the sky like a sharp blade. Lin Feng's Dragon Chant sword was earth-shattering. Boundless killing intent surged in the void. Wherever the cold light swept past, the raging flame Qilin was actually torn apart. Ah! Nangong Ba gave a horrible shriek and was propelled away. He looked like a kite with a broken string. One move, Lin Feng had injured Nangong Ba in one move. Lin Feng's sword cultivation level had increased, and his strength had become much stronger. Boom! Nangong Ba crashed onto the ground. Dust rose up in the air. What a terrifying sword! The crowd was stupefied while looking at Lin Feng. They were astonished. Nie Tian couldn't help but gulp. Lin Feng had been able to break through to the next level in a life or death situation and turn defeat into victory. Not only did he need talent and strength, but he also needed perseverance and willpower. Nangong Ba was really strong, but unfortunately, he had encountered Lin Feng, a genius on the path of swords. If Lin Feng hadn't broken through to the next level, the result of that battle would have been different. Lin Feng landed next to Nangong Ba. Nangong Ba struggled to stand up. Even though he was covered in blood, he didn't look scared at all. Nangong Ba leave, said Lin Feng indifferently. I don't know what happened between my teacher and your father back then, but I will find out. You're not going to kill me? Nangong Ba was surprised. There are no tensions between us. I won't kill you, said Lin Feng indifferently. Lin Feng, if you don't kill me, you will regret it. Nangong Ba's body shook and blood splashed out of his body. He looked furious again and turned around. He took a few steps and suddenly stopped. He looked at Lin Feng and said, Lin Feng, if you want to know what happened back then, ask your leader. After saying this, Nangong Ba's figure moved and he left straight away. Leader. Lin Feng was stupefied and looked at Liling Yun. Liling Yun's facial expression stiffened and he said, Lin Feng, go on the sealed sword path first. If you can complete the path of sealed swords, I will tell you what happened back then. All right, said Lin Feng while nodding. He looked extremely determined. Nie Tian took a deep breath. Lin Feng and Nangong Ba hadn't died, that wasn't bad. Next up was the path of sealing swords. Nie Tian had long been looking forward to the path of sealed swords. You want to know what it was like inside this ancient divine swords artifact spirit clone. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Nie Tian and Lin Feng's silhouettes flickered and they rose up in the air. Nie Tian observed the path of sealing swords at a close distance and immediately discovered that there were many small symbols on the surface of the gigantic sword. Nie Tian called them divine marks. However, the divine marks on the path of sealing swords were much more complicated than those on the Star Soul tablet and the mysterious three-legged cauldron. They seemed to contain a terrifying strength. Nie Tian and Lin Feng glanced at each other, and without hesitation, they immediately entered the path of sealing swords. Two silhouettes entered the gigantic sword and were enveloped by the light. Only two lights could be seen flashing. Lin Feng, Nie Tian, will you be able to complete the path of sealing swords? Liling Yun's heart was pounding. He had a complicated expression on his face. When they entered the path of sealing swords, Nie Tian had the feeling that time and space were changing. In the next moment, he found himself in a sword formation. Lin Feng's silhouette also disappeared. He was the only person in the surrounding space. Nie Tian examined the surrounding space and discovered that it was a space that was completely independent of the outside world. It was vast and boundless, as if there was no end to it. Master, this is indeed an illusion. Corpse Demon King's voice was full of surprise. He said, I can't determine the level of this illusion. Nie Tian's face darkened. Corpse Demon King was a level 6 illusionist. If even he couldn't determine the level of this illusion, it had to be at least level 7. An illusionary realm above tier 7. Just thinking about it was terrifying. After all, Illusion Emperor Bailey Feng Chun, one of the 9 emperors of the Heaven Realm, was only a level 7 illusionist. Nie Tian carefully sensed the sword formation around him and asked, Corpse Demon King, do you have a way to break the illusion? Originally, Nie Tian hoped that he could stay with Lin Feng and at least help him. However, the two of them were going through different tests. Lin Feng could only pray for his own luck. I can't. Corpse Demon King was stunned. He shook his head and said, This illusion seems to have many formations set up. Only by going through these formations can we naturally get out of the illusion. So it's like that. Nyetian was stunned. He frowned even more. Dragon Sword Killing Formation, activate. At that moment, a vast and mighty voice resounded. Immediately after, countless gigantic swords appeared. They looked like gigantic stone pillars and surrounded Nyetian. What a strong sword intent! Nyetian's expression flickered with astonishment. The sword intent that pervaded the killing formation was so powerful that it made his heart skip a beat. Before he could finish speaking, the dragon sword killing formation was activated with a bang. Swish, swish, swish. In the next moment, countless sword shadows shot out like a sky full of swords, falling down from the sky like a rain of swords. Nyetian sensed the sword intent in the sword shadows. He was suddenly stunned. He actually froze in an instant. PFFF. PFFF. Two sword intents landed on his arms. Two bloody wounds appeared and blood gushed out. Nyetian reacted immediately. He released his sword intent, and countless sword shadows flew out to fight against the sword formation. Master, this is... Corpse Demon King also reacted at that moment. He looked shocked and said, "Your sword intent." Yes. Nyetian nodded. He resisted the first wave of attack from the dragon sword killing formation, but he didn't dare relax at all. The reason he was stunned earlier was because he sensed that the sword insight that suffused the sword formation was actually his own sword insight. The sword intent of the Ink J Dragon sword couldn't be the same as Nyetian's. Therefore, the only explanation was that the dragon sword killing formation copied Nyetian's sword intent to fight against him. This kind of test was very strange. The sword formation could copy the sword intent of a swordsman. This was something that Nyetian had never heard of. Then, the dragon sword killing formation was activated for the second time. The sword intent was even more terrifying than before. Chapter 921. Nyetian didn't want to waste time in the dragon sword killing formation. He used the advanced sword move of the AO sword skill to break the sword formation. Boom, boom, boom. The violent sounds of explosions were endless, and the sword was wreaking havoc in the sword formation. However, the dragon sword killing formation didn't move at all. There was no sign of it breaking. Nyetian frowned. It seemed that he had underestimated the dragon sword killing formation. After a few more moves, Nyetian was injured all over his body and blood kept flowing out. It's just a sword formation and I can't break it. Nyetian felt strange. He realized that as he resisted, the dragon sword killing formation didn't get weaker. Instead, it got stronger. Master, the sword formation is absorbing your strength. Corpse Demon King immediately realized that something was wrong and reminded Nyetian. Nyetian focused his gaze and used his divine sense to feel. He realized that the dragon sword killing formation was absorbing his sword will. If this continued, the more Nyetian resisted, the stronger the dragon sword killing formation would get. The situation would only get worse. Nyetian took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. At this time, the more flustered he was, the more useless it would be. Next, Nyetian didn't fight it head-on. Instead, he slowly consumed the dragon sword killing formation and tried to suppress his sword will. After a while, the aura of the dragon sword killing formation became weaker and weaker. The killing formation is getting weaker. Nyetian felt this, and his face was filled with joy. He finally understood the principle of the dragon sword killing formation. It was completely dependent on the sword will of the swordsman to support the operation of the sword formation. The stronger the power displayed by the swordsman, the stronger the sword formation. When the swordsman became weaker, the sword formation would become weaker. This is a critical formation. As long as the dragon sword killing formation weakens to a certain point, I will be able to break the sword formation with one move. Nyetian murmured as he dealt with the sword shadows and the sword formation leisurely. This is the time. After a while, Nyetian felt that it was almost time. Suddenly, the corners of his mouth raised into a smile, and the sword intent in his body suddenly soared. He stabbed out with his sword, and the terrifying sword shadow bombarded the surrounding giant swords. Bang, bang, bang. Countless muffled sounds were heard. The giant swords broke one by one, and the dragon sword-killing array was broken. The moment the dragon sword-killing array was broken, a pure sword intent appeared and surged into Nietian's body. Nietian was slightly stunned, and then he was overjoyed because his sword intent had become stronger again. The path of sealed swords was indeed mysterious. The sword intent replicated in the sword formation was actually preserved in the sword formation. The moment the sword formation was broken, the sword intent surged into Nietian's body. Very good. My sword principle has already reached the pinnacle of sword spirit. Soon, I will be able to break through to sword soul. Nietian smiled to himself. According to his normal cultivation speed, it would take him at least a year or two to break through to sword spirit. The path of sealed swords had replicated his sword intent and imbued it into his body, which had greatly reduced the cultivation time. After breaking the dragon sword killing array, Nietian looked a little worried. Lin Feng would definitely undergo the same test. Would he be able to break the dragon sword killing array? Lin Feng's sword principle was probably the best among all the people that Nietian had ever met. Even Duanmu Lu, who had the 8 extreme sword imprint, was slightly inferior to Lin Feng. Nietian believed that Lin Feng would be able to break the dragon sword killing array. After that, Nietian continued walking. However, the path of sealed swords was a very strange place. The surroundings were the same, and there was only sword intent. Apart from that, there was nothing else. After walking for a few hours, nothing happened. Nietian felt like he was walking on the same spot. No matter where he went, the scenery in front of him was the same. Master, something is wrong here. It seems like we have entered an illusion. Corpse Luo Demon King sensed that something was wrong and reminded Nietian. Yeah. Nietian nodded solemnly, a bad premonition rising in his heart. He could feel that there was a strange qi around him that was constantly disturbing his mind. Eyebrows furrowed, Nietian sent a wisp of psychic power into his soul awareness. Do I have to keep walking like this? After a few hours, Nietian couldn't help but feel annoyed. He had originally thought that there would be a more difficult test, but he hadn't thought that it would be like this. Nothing had happened. For a period of time, Nietian felt like it had been a long time. It seemed like a few days had passed. However, in the eyes of the people outside, it had only been a few minutes. What are they doing? Why aren't they moving? When the people saw the 2 dots of light on the path of sealed swords, they looked at them in a strange way. They simply didn't know that Nietian and Lin Feng had been running on the path of sealed swords for a few days. What the hell is going on? On the path of sealed swords, Nietian stopped and became irritated. He had been running for a few days, but he was still in the same spot. Now, Nietian was already beginning to miss the dragon sword killing array. At least in the killing array, he had something to do. However, other than the illusory space in front of him, there was nothing else. How could he not be annoyed? Just as Nietian's annoyance reached its peak, he suddenly felt a strong qi pressure burst forth in his mind. Boom! Nietian felt a sudden explosion in his mind. Suddenly, his vision turned black and his mind began to tremble. A painful wail rang out. Nietian felt a terrifying power wreaking havoc, as though it was trying to pull his soul and martial body out. His eyes became empty and a deep sense of despair spread in his heart. In front of him was endless darkness. Nietian felt like he was falling into an abyss. The more he resisted, the faster he fell. After an unknown period of time, a huge force suddenly attacked him. The sudden pain made Nietian slightly sober. It seemed like he had landed on the ground. Nietian endured the huge pain. Suddenly, a sword intent surged out of his body and directly pierced through his shoulder. Blood spurted out. He didn't heal the wound. Instead, he let the blood flow slowly. This allowed him to stay awake. Standing on the spot, Nietian's mind gradually calmed down. Previously, the moment he fell, Nietian's divine sense was almost destroyed. Fortunately, he had fused with the divine rune on the 3-legged mysterious cauldron. His divine sense was far stronger than ordinary people. After he completely sobered up, the trembling of his soul gradually disappeared. Nyetian spread out his divine sense. He felt like he was in a valley. Nyetian. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in his mind. Hearing this voice, Nyetian suddenly went into a daze. Nyetian, 100 years have passed. Have you already forgotten this emperor's voice? That voice sounded again. This time, there was a hint of ridicule and ridicule. The familiar yet unfamiliar voice caused Nyetian's mind to tremble. He instantly became furious and roared out a name. Emperor Qingyong. There was no mistake. The voice that sounded in Nyetian's mind was Emperor Qingyong's voice. In the next instant, the surroundings suddenly became bright. An unforgettable face appeared in front of Nyetian. It was Emperor Qingyong. Luo Chun fainting. The enemy from his previous life suddenly appeared. Nyetian became berserk. He shouted out the other party's name word by word. Chapter 922. We meet again. A maniacal laughter exploded in Nyetian's ears like thunder from the nine heavens. The enemy from his previous life was standing right in front of him. Nyetian's entire being had turned into a volcano, ready to erupt at any moment. Luo Chunhan, pay with your life. The thirst for vengeance caused Nyetian to lose his rationality in an instant. With a roar, sword intent erupted from his entire body. The entire valley shook violently, unable to withstand the immense pressure of the sword chi. It was on the verge of collapsing. However, everything in Nyetian's eyes was unreal. What he was releasing wasn't sword intent, but violent blood chi. Master, wake up. The corpse Luo, Devil Lord, screamed crazily, but Nyetian couldn't hear his voice at all. The blood chi in his body was burning crazily, and the surrounding space was filled with a thick stench of blood. At this moment, the corpse Luo, Devil Lord, finally understood. The strange mental energy in the surrounding space was the test of the path of sealed swords for martial artists. This type of mental energy was extremely strange. It could slowly affect a martial artist's state of mind, causing them to become irritable. Then, it would awaken something in the deepest part of a martial artist's soul. It could be fear or some sort of desire. Nyetian was completely consumed by hatred. His eyes were bloodshot, and the blood chi in his body was burning continuously. His entire body was bathed in a rain of blood. Nyetian, don't you want revenge? This emperor is standing right in front of you. Can you kill me? Luo Chenhun was arrogant. A small grave appeared beneath his feet. On the tombstone, 2 words were carved. Nyetian. Nyetian, this is the tombstone that your disciple erected for you. This emperor is going to destroy it right now. I want you to die in peace. Ha ha ha. The moment Luo Chenhuan's voice landed, he raised his leg high and stomped down on the small grave. The arrogant voice was like a demonic voice, disturbing Nyetian's mind, causing him to sink into a state of madness. Luo Chenan, I'll kill you. Nyetian roared furiously while the sword intent within his entire body rose explosively to the limit. Right at this instant, an explosion suddenly resounded within his mind, and then a strand of spiritual deterrence descended onto his soul. Nyetian's whole body suddenly trembled, and the bloodthirst in his eyes disappeared directly. The scene in front of him suddenly changed. Everything was still the same, and there was only the sword intent in the surroundings, as if nothing had happened. Nyetian was stunned on the spot. Seeing that his whole body was drenched in blood, he couldn't react for a long time. Master, are you all right? Corpse Luo, Demon Monarch, saw that Nyetian had woken up, and his heart was finally at ease. The scene just now was extremely dangerous. If Nyetian had not woken up in time, he would have died from self-immolation. I'm fine. Nyetian let out a long breath, and his expression slightly relaxed. Luckily, he had left a strand of spiritual energy in his divine sense to wake him up at the most crucial moment, or else the consequences would be unimaginable. This place is too strange. If I hadn't considered the danger beforehand, I might have lost my life here. Nietion let out a long breath, but he still had lingering fears. He spread out his divine sense and sensed the surrounding space. That strange spiritual energy had already disappeared. Seems like I've passed the second test. Nietion relaxed a lot. Luckily, his spiritual energy was strong enough, or else that kind of spiritual pressure alone was enough to make his divine sense collapse. Continuing forward, Nietion soon saw a cloudy sky. In the middle of the clouds, countless sharp swords hung upside down in the air, forming a sword stairway that led to the sky, as if it led to the end of the sky, to another world. Through heaven's sword stairway, open. Just as the stairway to the sky appeared, a mighty voice resounded in the void. Through heaven sword stairway. Nietion was slightly taken aback, and then he sensed strands of profound sword Tao intent from the stairway of swords above the clouds. That was the purest form of sword energy, even if the true intent of alchemy and cultivation were the same. It seems like I just have to climb the through heaven sword stairway to pass the test, whispered Nietion while looking at the stairway in the sky. The through heaven sword stairway was extremely mysterious. After the deadly dragon sword deployment and the strange illusion, Nietion had become much more cautious. In this mysterious and unpredictable environment, one wrong step could lead to a fatal disaster. At that moment, a horrible shriek spread through the air. Lin Feng. Nietion was stupefied. He looked around, but he could only hear the voice. He couldn't see anyone. But he was sure that it was Lin Feng who had shouted, "Don't kill my brother." Lin Feng's voice spread through the air again. It sounded like his heart was being torn apart. Oh no! Nietion pulled a long face. It seemed like Lin Feng had already been trapped in the illusion. But he didn't know where Lin Feng was, so he couldn't help him break the illusion. "Master, we have to finish the through heaven sword path as soon as possible. If we break the illusion, Lin Feng will be safe," said the Demon King Corpse Luo to Nietion. "All right," nodded Nietion. He didn't pay attention to anything else. He was fixedly staring at the stairway in the sky. There weren't many tests on the through heaven sword deployment, but each one was fatal. Nietion thought that only one through heaven sword deployment would be able to pass the deadly dragon sword deployment. Lin Feng couldn't pass the test of the illusion. It didn't mean that he wasn't talented enough. It just meant that his mental strength wasn't strong enough. Nietion was extremely lucky. His mental strength was strong enough to keep him awake at the critical moment. Nietion didn't hesitate anymore. His silhouette flickered, and he jumped onto his sword. Outside of the through heaven sword path, the crowd was becoming more and more excited. At the same time, they didn't understand what was going on. On the through heaven sword path, one of the lights was moving forward while the other one was moving towards the sword. "Look, that silhouette is extremely fast. He's about to reach the sword." The crowd was astonished. They were all trying to guess whether it was Lin Feng or Nietion. "It's definitely Lin Feng," someone was shouting excitedly. "Of course it's Lin Feng. He deserves to be called the leader of the 3 swords of Celestial Sword Pavilion. He's extremely talented. I'm sure that he'll be able to pass the through heaven sword path." Everybody was agreeing. It seemed like they had already forgotten that before Lin Feng and Nietion had entered the through heaven sword path, they had thought that they were trying to kill themselves. Jean de Bayo was smiling cold. He looked at Lin Feng with disdain. He already knew from Lu Shan that the through heaven sword path was extremely difficult. He was convinced that if there was anyone in the world who could pass the through heaven sword path, it would be Nietion. Nietion didn't know what was happening outside. His silhouette was moving toward the top of the through heaven sword path. However, that strange staircase was releasing a terrifying pressure. The closer he got to the top of the stairs, the stronger the pressure became. Nietion was sweating profusely. His entire body was soaked in sweat. The pressure on the stairs was extremely strange. He couldn't avoid it. He could only endure it. Chapter 923. Inside the Path of Sealed Swords. Above the clouds, the swords hanging upside down released a mysterious sword intent, which turned into waves of sword force that pressed down on Nietion's body. Nietion's speed slowed down. He had already discovered that as he climbed higher and higher, The sword force brought by the sword intent was getting stronger and stronger, almost crushing his body and soul. Sword chi, sword heart, sword intent, sword power. Niatan muttered to himself, but he couldn't relieve the pressure brought by the sword stairs. Waves of power penetrated through his soul and actually sealed Niatian's sword chi. Huh? Niatian's face suddenly darkened. He immediately understood that the path of sealed swords sealed the swordsman's sword heart by relying on the power of the sword intent. The heavenly sword stairs represented different sword intent, which was also the comprehension of the sword Tao. When a swordsman stepped on the heavenly sword stairs, his sword heart would be sealed by a higher sword intent. In this way, the swordsman's sword heart would be sealed, and he would be unable to cultivate the sword, unable to increase his sword Tao level, and forever unable to improve his sword Tao strength. After understanding this, Nietian felt a lot more relaxed. His sword Tao level wasn't high, but his comprehension of the sword Tao was terrifyingly high. In his previous life, he had already comprehended the profound meaning of the sword, which represented the peak of the sky sword Tao. Nietian believed that as long as he persevered, he would definitely be able to climb the heavenly sword stairs to the end. Afterwards, Nietian's heart completely calmed down. He no longer pursued speed, but took one step at a time. Outside the path of sealed swords, everyone's eyes were focused on the constantly rising dot of light. Their eyes were blazing with passion. For the first time, someone had a hope of passing the path of sealed swords. Lil Ling Yun's gaze turned from passion to sluggishness. He murmured, "Lin Feng, you are indeed a sword maniac. The ancestor once said that you are the #1 sword genius of Sky Sword Pavilion in 1,000 years, and it was indeed true." Lil Ling didn't know much about Nietian, so he was certain that the constantly advancing figure was Lin Feng. Even though the figure's speed had slowed down, it was very stable and unceasingly advanced. With every step Nietian took, everyone's hearts rumbled. Sword spirit, sword soul, sword spirit. On the sky-reaching sword stairs, Nietian murmured softly. He could sense that the sword shadow beneath his feet represented the realm of sword soul. Next would be the profound meaning of the sword. As long as Nietian completed the profound meaning of sword, he would be able to pass the path of sealed swords. Nietian let out a long breath of turbid air. When he stopped paying attention to the pressure of the sword Tao concept, that pressure had greatly weakened. Step by step, Nietian slowly moved forward on the sword stairs. Sword profound. Nietian knew that he had stepped onto the sword stairs of the sword profundity when he felt the pressure from the intent realm suddenly increase. Every step that followed was extremely difficult, but Nietian persisted. If Lin Feng had been at the top of the stairs, it would have been impossible for him to reach there. Even though Nietian's sword Tao wasn't as strong as Lin Feng's, his understanding of the sword Tao was much stronger than Lin Feng's. It was no wonder that countless geniuses of the Sky Sword Pavilion had failed to pass the path of sealed swords in the past thousands of years. It was because none of them had been able to understand the profound meaning of sword. On the sword stairs of the sword profundity realm, Nietian tried his best to take a few hundred steps. His body had reached its limit. Even though he had the 9-star dragon veins and billions of stars supporting him, he couldn't go on any longer. Can I still take the next step? Nietian sensed that his martial body had reached its limit. The sword stairs of the sword profundity realm seemed to have reached its limit as well. The sword Tao concept of the next step was obviously much stronger. How was that possible? Nietian's heart was pounding. Why was the sword stairs of the sword profundity realm not over when the sword stairs of the sword profundity realm had already reached its end? Could it be that there was a higher sword Tao realm above the sword profundity realm? Thinking of this, Nietian couldn't help but stiffen. This was something he had never thought of. Was there a higher sword Tao after the sword profundity realm? At this moment, the pressure from the concept became even stronger. Nietian didn't have time to think. He had to move forward. There was no other choice. If he retreated now, it would mean that his sword heart was sealed and he would never have the chance to pursue the sword Tao again. I'll risk it. With this thought in mind, Nietion let out an angry roar in his heart. He took a step forward, and the sword stairs under his feet suddenly sank, lifting his body up to a higher level. Right at this moment, an extremely powerful pressure appeared, pressing down on them from all directions. Ah! Nietion let out a blood-curdling scream. Unable to bear it any longer, he crashed down from the sky. If there was a higher realm above the sword profundity realm, it was definitely not something that could be comprehended in a short period of time. Nietion was bombarded by the strong force and fell down the sword stairs like a kite with a broken string. What's going on? Outside of the path of sealed swords, the crowd was stupefied when they saw the light that was about to come out suddenly fall down. Fail! Luling Yun's entire body suddenly trembled, and he was at a loss for words. He was just one step away, and he had failed. He failed. Lin Feng still hasn't passed the path of sealed swords. The crowd sighed. They were looking at Lin Feng in a strange way. They were waiting to see Lin Feng come out of the path of sealed swords. Boom! At the moment when the crowd sighed, a silhouette flew out of the path of sealed swords. Lin Feng. When the crowd saw Lin Feng's face, they were stupefied, and immediately after, they were astonished. Because Lin Feng was the light that hadn't moved the entire time. That meant that the person who had almost passed the path of sealed swords wasn't him. It was Nietion. How was that possible? Many people were astonished. Lin Feng, the sword freak, had failed the path of sealed swords. He wasn't as talented as the silver-haired cultivator. That was incredible. Lin Feng's silhouette was astonished. After a long time, he slowly came back to his senses. He checked his godly awareness and discovered that his sword heart hadn't been sealed. He hadn't passed the path of sealed swords. His sword heart should have been sealed, but it hadn't been sealed. What was going on? Look, that silhouette is flying. At that moment, someone suddenly shouted in surprise. Everybody raised their heads and looked in the direction of the path of sealed swords. That light suddenly stopped, and immediately after, it moved towards the path of sealed swords. In the next moment, the path of sealed swords started shaking violently, and a majestic voice spread through the air. After hundreds of thousands of years, I have finally found someone suitable for me. That voice was rolling in the air like thunder. The entire sky and earth were shaking. Hearing this voice, everyone's eyes became dull, and their hearts surged with an indescribable shock. Surprisingly, the path of sealed swords had opened its mouth. Your sword cultivation has only reached the abstruse level, but you barely passed the path of sealed swords. I will have to suffer a bit. Immediately after, that voice spread through the air again. An incomparably monstrous sword chi filled the air and spread in all directions. In a flash, everybody's soul started shaking violently. Many people started coughing up blood. Chapter 924. It's that silver-haired boy, shouted the crowd when they saw Nietion. They were all astonished. Very few people knew Nietion's real identity. Most of them believed that Lin Feng was the one who had the highest chance of passing the sealed sword path. Unfortunately, it was Nietion who was standing in front of them. Nietion was standing at the top of the sealed sword path. He looked very puzzled. Originally, he had already failed, but at the moment when he was falling, a strange force had caught him and helped him cross the stairs of heaven and earth. Then a strange voice emerged. At this moment, Nietion suddenly felt that a figure had appeared in his sea of consciousness, and it caused him to be indescribably shocked. His entire body instantly trembled, and in the next moment, he understood something and exclaimed, "You're the weapon spirit of the Ink Jade Dragon Sword?" Nietion was very sure that the voice a moment ago had come from the person in his mind. Without a doubt, this person had come out of the sealed sword path and entered his mind. But to be exact, it wasn't a person. It was just a silhouette that looked like a person. It was only about 1 meter tall, but it looked like an old man. It gave people an indescribable sense of joy. "Oh," the silhouette smiled as if he was pleasantly surprised and said, "Little boy, I wouldn't have thought that you would know about the spirit of a weapon. Are you really the spirit of the Inky Dragon Sword?" Nietion gulped. He was dumbstruck. The Inky Dragon Sword, the ancient spirit of a godly sword, had surprisingly appeared in his mind. Huh. At that moment, the silhouette seemed to have discovered something strange. He was surprised and shouted, "Little boy, how do you know my name?" The silhouette remembered that he hadn't told his name yet. How did Nietion know who he was? "Little boy, I'm asking you a question." The silhouette shouted again when he saw that Nietion was dumbstruck. Only then did Nietion react. His expression softened a little. He didn't try to hide anything and said, "A friend of mine seems to have seen you before. He said that you were the inky jade dragon sword." "Your friend?" The old man was taken aback. He stroked his beard and muttered, "Do you still have friends from the ancient times?" However, he didn't care too much about it, and immediately said, "Little guy, you're lucky this time. I've chosen you to be my master." "Master?" Nietion was stunned for a moment. Then an ecstatic expression appeared on his face. It seemed like the inky jade dragon sword was going to recognize him as its master. The old man seemed to examine Nietion's body. Then he frowned and said, "Kid, your sword Dao realm is a bit lacking, but your comprehension of the sword Dao is still passable, reaching the pinnacle of profoundness. Moreover, you actually have the royal spirit dragon bloodline in your body, and you even have a power that I can't see through." How strange. The old man sensed several powers in Nietion's body, but there was one power that even he was afraid of. It was as if there was a giant beast hiding in Nietion's body, and when this giant beast awakens one day, it will definitely shake the world. However, what surprised him even more was that there were actually 3 types of sword Dao in Nietion's body. This was an extremely rare thing. Nietion was speechless when he heard the old man's words. His comprehension of the sword Dao was already at the pinnacle of profoundness, but in the old man's eyes, it was just passable. It seemed that there was a higher realm of the sword Dao in this world. It was just that he didn't know about it before. "Little guy, get ready to accept the inky jade dragon sword as your master." Before Nietion could completely react, the old man chuckled and immediately disappeared. In the next moment, the path of sealed swords began to tremble violently. Waves of powerful sword chi filled the air, and the momentum of the world was forcefully changed. The entire sky was on the verge of collapsing, as if it could collapse at any time. Nietion was completely shocked by this sudden scene. Feeling the huge sword Dao surging around his body, he could feel the terrifying power contained in it. What happened? The crowd looked at Nietion in the sky, and the shock in their hearts was indescribable. Nietion had passed the path of sealed swords, and this had already exceeded everyone's expectations. What was going to happen next seemed to be even more terrifying and shocking. Oh no! Lu Lingyun felt that the path of sealed swords had become extremely violent and unstable, as if it was about to explode. His face sank, and he began to worry. Would Nietion destroy the path of sealed swords? Although countless genius swordsmen of Sky Sword Pavilion had their sword hearts sealed by the path of sealed swords, the path of sealed swords was still the most sacred object of Sky Sword Pavilion. How could it be destroyed in the hands of an outsider? Lu Lingyun's figure moved, and he wanted to get closer to the path of sealed swords. Boom! At this moment, an earth-shattering sound was heard, and the path of sealed swords collapsed directly. Endless sword chi shot out in an instant. Lu Lingyun couldn't bear the pressure of the sword chi that came charging at him. He screamed and was sent flying. The formless sword chi filled the air, spreading to the entire Sky Sword Pavilion, then the entire Holy Light region, and then the entire Shumi world. At this moment, all the swordsmen present felt the sword hearts in their bodies being suppressed by an invisible force. Many wanted to resist, but they spat out a mouthful of blood. Nietion looked at the scene on the ground, and his eyes widened. He already knew what had happened, but he didn't feel uncomfortable at all. Instead, he felt an explosive power filling his body, and it was very comfortable. However, the commotion caused by the collapse of the path of sealed swords was far more than that. Not only the swordsmen of Sky Sword Pavilion, but all the swordsmen of the entire Shumi world felt their sword hearts being suppressed at this moment. All those who resisted were so oppressed that they spat out blood, and their faces turned pale. What a terrifying strength! Lin Feng was the closest to Nietian, so the pressure he felt was the most obvious. His body swayed, and he almost fell. However, the feeling of their sword hearts being suppressed only lasted for a short time. After a short while, everyone recovered. The crowd looked at the sky with even more fervor. Many people had a premonition that something terrifying was about to happen. "Little boy, get ready for my baptism," said the old man in the light shadow, as Nietian floated in the sky. The next moment, all the sword chi in the air suddenly collapsed towards Nietian and crazily flowed into his body. Nietian turned into a black hole that absorbed the sword chi, and the force of the sky and earth was under his control. Endless power flowed into his body, and Nietian sensed the sword intent in his body skyrocketing. The increase in power made him feel unreal. The speed at which the sword chi gathered was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, all the sword chi had entered Nietian's body. Boom! Almost at the same time, an enormous and boundless sword intent suddenly shot out of Nietian's body. The moment the sword intent soared into the sky, it was like a rainbow piercing through the clouds. The boundless sword intent contained the power to tear the sky and earth apart. BZZ. Above the clouds, the space let out a violent wail, and immediately after, a pitch-black crack that was tens of thousands of meters long appeared. Chapter 925. Outside the heavenly sword hall, countless pairs of eyes looked at the scene in front of them. Their eyes trembled violently. They did not know how to face everything in front of them. A sword intent directly tore the void and broke the restrictions of the space rules. What kind of terrifying power was this? It was far beyond the scope of everyone's understanding. Nietian was also looking at the spatial rift in the sky, and he was extremely shocked. At the same time, in the divine realm of Heaven Realm, a strand of vast and powerful sword intent suddenly appeared, and then it transformed into a shapeless sword ripple that madly suffused the surroundings. What a terrifying sword intent! All the swordsmen in the divine realm of Heaven Realm felt their souls tremble and their eyes revealed uncontrollable fear. On top of a mountain, a peerless figure stood alone in the air, like a sharp sword staring at the heaven and earth. If Nietian was here, he would be able to recognize at a glance that the figure on the top of the mountain was the peak swordsman of the divine realm of Heaven Realm, limitless sword Saint Imo Qianjun. Puff! Suddenly, Imo Qianjun's body trembled slightly, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. He said in shock, "What a powerful sword intent." Imo Qianjun was already at the peak of sword intent. Reaching the peak of sword intent represented the pinnacle of sword intent in the Heaven Realm. But he could feel that the inexplicable sword chi just now had surpassed the sword intent of sword intent. No! The next moment, Imo Qianjun suddenly sensed something. His grave and stern face suddenly stiffened. Then his eyes revealed great joy. Just like a child, he shouted, "Day-Night Proudsword, my old friend, you're not dead." Day-Night Proudsword was the name of Nietian. Imo Qianjun felt an inexplicable familiarity from the sword chi. It was the proud sword chi. The proud sword chi was unique to Nietian. Only Nietian had it. Imo Qianjun and Nietian were best friends. He was very familiar with the proud sword intent. He was very sure that the sword chi just now definitely contained the proud sword chi. He was even sure that the proud sword chi was released by Nietian himself. "Nietian, old Imo, knew that you were still alive." Imo Qianjun was extremely excited. His figure flashed and turned into a sword light, disappearing into the sky. At the same time, the other pinnacle swordsmen also sensed something. Many of them knew that Day-Night Proudsword, who had fallen more than 100 years ago, was still alive. Day-Night Divine Domain, within the Day-Night Divine Hall. A figure came from the void and directly landed on the main hall. "How dare you intrude into the Day-Night Shrine? You're courting death." Just as this figure landed, countless figures soared into the sky and surrounded him. These martial artists had terrifying power of laws flowing around them. They were all Heavenly Emperor martial artists. A heavenly emperor realm martial artist was only a guard in the day-night temple. However, when the guards saw the figure's face clearly, they were all shocked. The newcomer looked to be in his 40s or 50s. He was skinny and looked like a mummy. His aura was restrained, and his eyes were like a bottomless abyss. Scram! The person called out coldly. All the guards were stunned. They did not even dare to breathe too loudly and directly retreated. The person did not even look at the guards and shouted, "Luo Chinhun, come out and meet me." This person came to the day-night shrine and actually called the day-night emperor by name. His identity must be extraordinary. "Brother Dugu, how have you been?" Before he could finish his sentence, a powerful voice rang out, following which a burly figure appeared and stood in front of him. The burly figure had a head of white hair and looked majestic like a lion. He was none other than one of the 9 emperors of the Heaven Realm, Luo Chinhun. The person standing in front of Luo Chinhun was also a pinnacle swordsman of the Heaven Realm, Dongchuan Sword Evil, Dugu and I. Dugani's sharp eyes were like a fox's as he looked at Luo Chinhun coldly. He said in a deep voice, looking back at the world, "The energy is like a mountain. No one can be compared to it." Hearing this, Luo Chinhuan's expression changed, because this was what the Snow Emperor had said about Nietian. What did Dugu and I mean by suddenly visiting him and saying this out of the blue? "Don't be nervous. I'm not your enemy." Dugani's expression was cold. His eyes flashed with sharpness. He said, "Someone told me to tell you that this person is not dead." This person? Luo Chinhuan's expression was extremely gloomy. There was fear in his eyes. "You mean Nietian?" Although he was unwilling to mention this name, Luo Chinhun said it anyway. "Yes." Dugu and I nodded. "Impossible." Luo Chinhuan's expression froze. Then he shouted, "He died 100 years ago. I destroyed his body with my own hands. He can't be alive. This is his sword energy." Dugu and I didn't waste any time. He flicked his finger, and a gust of sword energy filled the air. This, Luo Chinyu sensed the sword chi and his entire body stiffened. He immediately felt a chill run down his spine and his tailbone. Although he wasn't a swordsman, he was very familiar with Nietian's sword energy. This was definitely Nietian's sword energy. "Nietian, he's really not dead." More than 10 seconds later, Luo Chinyu woke up as if he had just woken up from a dream. His body suddenly sank, and his body swayed, almost falling down. Nietian had always been a nightmare that he couldn't get rid of. He couldn't remember how many times he had woken up from his dreams, screaming, "Nietian, don't kill me." Actually, a few years ago, when the Heaven Realm's creation Saint Stone was cut into 2, Luo Chinhun felt the aura of the 9 extreme beast. At that time, he suspected that Nietian might still be alive. Now that he saw Nietian's sword energy, it proved that he was really alive. Duga and I looked at Luo Chinhun cold. His expression didn't change at all. The sword energy came from the Sumera world. "I don't need to tell you what to do next, right?" Dugu and I said coldly after Luo Chinhun calmed down a little. "I know." Luo Chinhun finally calmed down, but the fear in his eyes lingered. He's in the Sumera world. His strength is at the Heaven Realm at most. His sword Dao has reached the Sword Soul Realm. That's all I know. Dugu and I nodded slightly and said indifferently, "Someone told me to tell you that this has to be handled in secret. Don't alarm anyone." "Understood." Luo Chinhun nodded heavily. He had already started a plan in his heart. Dugu and I didn't say anything else. His figure flashed and merged into the void, disappearing. "Nietian." Luo Chinhun clenched his fists. His eyes were filled with viciousness. He said coldly, "You're really tough. I've destroyed your corpse, but you can still come back to life. But since I can kill you once, I can kill you again." Chapter 926. Spatial World, Heavenly Sword Pavilion, outside the Heavenly Sword Great Hall. High up in the sky, Nietian's figure stood there like a sharp sword that split the sky, his entire body surging with a terrifying sword light. The sword light shot 10,000 meters away and did not dissipate for a long time. The crowd looked at that figure standing in the center of the sword light, their gazes lifeless, not knowing how to express the shock in their hearts. No one could have thought that after Nietian passed through the path of sealed swords, he actually absorbed the path of sealed swords. Nietian's expression was somewhat stiff. Everything that happened just now similarly exceeded his expectations. The instant the divine sword recognized its master, that surging sword intent was really too terrifying. It actually directly broke the spatial restriction. Truly horrifying. Nietian suppressed the shock in his heart. Divine sense probed his body, but he was dumbfounded once more. His Sword Dao realm directly rose from Sword Spirit realm to peak Sword Soul realm. It seemed like it was going to break through to Sword Soul realm very soon. At the same time, Nietian even sensed that his sword intent seemed to have a very subtle change, becoming even more powerful. What was even stranger was that even his strength also rose from 2nd level Deva being to 4th level Deva being. The advancement of Sword Dao realm, Nietian could understand. After all, he absorbed a large amount of sword chi, but the advancement of martial Dao cultivation made him somewhat puzzled. The light shadow old man appeared inside Nietian's sea of consciousness once more. Seeing Nietian's puzzlement, he said with a chuckle, "Little fellow, this Empyrean changed the power of heaven and earth within the surrounding 100,000 meters. The heaven and earth spiritual energy within 100,000 meters was all absorbed by you. It's impossible for your strength not to increase even if you don't want to. So it's like this." Nietian was stunned. Then, he used his divine sense to sense the surrounding spiritual energy. Sure enough, the surrounding spiritual energy had become much thinner. He murmured, "If I can cultivate this way in the future, won't my strength soon reach the peak of Heavenly Emperor? Dream on, right?" The light shadow old man smiled huffily and said, "The instant the divine sword recognized its master, this Empyrean sensed the power of the divine sword's main body. That's why it can change the power of heaven and earth. You'll only be in the limelight for a while. From now on, you'll have to cultivate diligently." Nietian was slightly speechless and disappointed. Then, he remembered that the old man in front of him wasn't the original Ink Jade Dragon Sword, but a clone. So he asked, "Senior, how should I address you in the future?" Even though he knew that the old man in his sea of consciousness was just an artifact spirit avatar, Nietian still had to address him as senior. This feeling was somewhat strange. "You're quite polite, kid. You can just call me Sword Elder from now on." The old man smiled faintly. He was quite satisfied with Nietian's performance. Nietian nodded and said, "My name is Nietian." Nietian. The Sword Elder repeated the name. He inexplicably smiled and said, "Your name is quite domineering. It is much better than my previous master's name." Nietian faintly smiled. He gradually regained his composure and muttered, "Sword Elder, that sword intent just now was really terrifying. That was also the power released by the inky rain dragon word, wasn't it?" "Of course." The Sword Elder laughed strangely and said, "That sword intent just now, not only the entire Shumi world, I'm afraid all the swordsmen in the heaven realm also felt the terror of the sword intent. The inky rain dragon sword was an ancient godly sword. The moment it recognized its master, it would stimulate the power of its original body. Naturally, it could shake the higher world. The heaven realm." Nietian was stunned for a moment. His eyes suddenly sank, and a worried look appeared on his face. He asked, "Sword Elder, are you saying that the swordsmen from the heaven realm also felt that sword chi?" The Sword Elder nodded. He noticed that Nietian's expression was not right. He smiled and asked, "What? Could it be that you have enemies in the heaven realm? Are you afraid that they will come to kill you?" The Sword Elder's words were completely teasing. But unfortunately, his teasing came true. Nietian thought of this. That's why there was worry on his face. His current strength was still not strong. If Luo Chenhun knew that he was still alive, he would definitely send people to the Shumi world to kill him. Any random heavenly emperor from the heaven realm would be a huge threat to Nietian. After a while, Nietian became cold. He estimated that there were definitely not many people who could recognize him from the sword intent. It should only be the other 4 Heaven Realm swordsmen who were at the peak of the Heaven Realm. Among the 4, Niet Tian, Limitless Sword Saint Mo Qianjun, and Western Region Sword Emperor Jiu Qiansheng were good friends. It was impossible for them to leak his whereabouts. As for the other 2, Don Chuan Sword Evil Duguanai and North Sea Sword Ruler Gui Hen, although Niet Tian did not have a deep relationship with them, they could barely be considered friends. They would most likely not ask about him. Thinking of this, Niet Tian relaxed a lot. Even if someone knew that he was still alive, it did not mean that Luo Chenhun would know about it. But clearly, he was too optimistic. Dugu and I had already revealed that he was still alive to Luo Chenhun, and now Luo Chenhun was already preparing to deal with him. Niet Tian didn't worry too much. He still had a lot of questions he wanted to ask the Sword Elder. However, before he could open his mouth, the Sword Elder said, Niet Tian, there are some things that I won't tell you right now. When the time is right, you will naturally know who I am. For now, you can just treat this deity as a doppelganger of an artifact spirit. Niet Tian swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. Niet Tian. At this moment, Lin Feng walked over, looking much better. He had not passed the path of sealed swords, and if not for Niet Tian, his sword heart would have been sealed. Niet Tian, you absorbed the path of sealed swords. At practically the exact same moment, a furious roar resounded. Liling's entire body surged with sword intent, and his eyes actually revealed a wisp of piercingly cold, killing intent. The Path of Sealed Swords was one of the 3 holy treasures of Celestial Sword Pavilion, and yet Tian had absorbed it. How could Lilingyan not be furious? He also remembered that the other holy treasure of Celestial Sword Pavilion, the Nirvana Holy Heart, had also been absorbed by Niet Tian. Lu Lingyan wanted to kill him. Leader Lu, what is the meaning of this? Asked Niet Tian when he sensed Lu Lingyan's killing intent. He looked upset and said, the Path of Sealed Swords is open to all sword cultivators. I passed the test and absorbed the Path of Sealed Swords. Is that wrong? Leader. At that moment, Lin Feng frowned and said, Niet Tian passed the Path of Sealed Swords and received its approval. He absorbed the strength of the Path of Sealed Swords. He did not do anything wrong. Lin Feng, are you still a member of Celestial Sword Pavilion? Shouted Lu Lingyun furiously. He released even more deadly energy and shouted in a deep voice, Niet Tian, I order you to hand over the Path of Sealed Swords. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. Impolite? Niet Tian looked glum and said in a cold voice, Leader Lu, I want to see how impolite you can be. Since the other side had already shed all pretense of cordiality, Niet Tian didn't need to be patient. If worst came to worst, he would just fight. Chapter 9:27. Up in the sky, Niet Tian and Lu Lingyun faced off. The crowd was stunned by this scene, but their eyes were filled with unconcealable passion. One was someone who had just fused with the Path of Sealed Swords, while the other was the Pavilion Master of Sky Sword Pavilion. If these two were to fight, it would definitely be spectacular. Overestimating myself, Niet Tian looked at Lu Lingyun and smiled cold. Pavilion Master Lu, do you really think you can stop me? Similarly, Niet Tian's eyes were filled with disdain. After fusing with the power of the Ink Jade Dragon Sword, his strength had increased qualitatively. Even before fusing with the Ink Jade Dragon Sword, Niet Tian wasn't afraid of Lu Lingyun. Lu Lingyun was at the 6th layer of the Celestial Realm, and his sword cultivation was at the pinnacle of the Sword Soul. Niet Tian judged that he might not be as strong as Lin Feng. He didn't want to fight Lu Lingyun. After all, the latter was the Pavilion Master. If he lost, his reputation would be greatly damaged. However, if Lu Lingyun continued to be overbearing, Niet Tian wouldn't mind making a move. Niet Tian, you're courting death. Lu Lingyun's eyes were filled with killing intent after being looked down upon by Niet Tian. He didn't believe that a swordsman who had just reached the 4th layer of the Celestial Realm would be his match. Father, what are you doing? At this moment, a clear and anxious voice sounded. It was Lu Shan, who appeared and stood between Niet Tian and Lu Lingyun. Shaner, step back. Lu Lingyun shouted and said cold. Niet Tion stole the Nirvana, sacred heart of Sky Sword Pavilion, killed people of Sky Sword Pavilion, and now openly took away the path of sealed swords. He is an enemy of Sky Sword Pavilion. As the Pavilion Master, I will not allow him to leave Sky Sword Pavilion alive. Nirvana, sacred heart. The crowd was stunned when they heard Lil Lingyun's words. Many people immediately understood that Niet Tion was the one who took away the Nirvana sacred heart from the 3,000 lesser worlds. Niet Tion was from the 3,000 lesser worlds. This news shocked everyone. No one would have thought that a swordsman from a lower world would be so powerful. Pavilion Master Li's words are so harsh. Niet Tion looked at Lil Lingyun and said coldly. Lil Lingyun looked modest on the surface, but he was actually a narrow-minded person. However, even if everyone from Sky Sword Pavilion attacked together, they might not be able to stop Niet Tion. Niet Tion, let me ask you one more time. Are you going to hand over the path of sealing swords or not? Lil Lingyun asked coldly. Sword will condensed around him, ready to erupt with terrifying power at any moment. Make your move. Niet Tion didn't want to talk nonsense with him and said directly, Niet Tion, you're courting death. Don't blame me. Lil Ling no longer concealed her killing intent. With a furious roar, a long, golden sword appeared in her hand. As she thrust it forward, a curtain of water appeared between heaven and earth and bore down on Niet Tion with overwhelming force. Niet Tion's eyes narrowed slightly. Water attribute swordsmen were rare. Lil Lingyun's sword looked mighty, but in fact, it was more agile than powerful. Lil Lingyun, Niet Tion blurred into action, morphed into a streak of light, and charged towards him, shouting, I'll only need one sword strike to defeat you. As his cold voice fell, Niet Tion's sword soared into the air and shot out a dazzling sword ray that spread 1,000 meters away. Bang! With a muffled sound, the sword ray swept past, and the water curtain in the air shattered. That seemingly powerful aura was completely defeated. Lil Lingyun's eyes narrowed when he saw the sword ray shooting over. His eyes were filled with unconcealable fear, and he couldn't help but scream. No! A sharp voice rang out the moment the sword ray took his life. It was Lishan. Boom! The murderous sword ray suddenly stopped when it was only 10 meters away from Lil Lingyun, and then disappeared in the void. Niet Tion's figure appeared. He looked at Lil Lingyun coldly and didn't say a word. You? Lil Lingyun's eyes widened. His 3 souls left his body, and his aura left his body. His whole body was in a daze, and his mouth was wide open, but he couldn't say a word. He had never thought that Niet Tion's strength would be so strange. He was the leader of the Sky Sword Pavilion with the strength of the 6th Heaven Realm and the peak of Sword Soul, but he couldn't even take one sword from Niet Tion. And Niet Tion obviously didn't use his full strength in this sword. Fortunately, Lishan's scream was timely. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. In fact, Niet Tion didn't want to kill Lil Lingyun. He just wanted to teach the latter a lesson. After all, Lil Lingyun was Lishan's father, and this was the Sky Sword Pavilion. How could he kill the leader of the Sky Sword Pavilion? However, the power of the sword just now was too terrifying. Not only did it exceed Lil Lingyun's expectations, it also exceeded Niet Tion's expectations. It seems that the power of the Ink Jade Dragon sword has affected my sword will, making it stronger, Niet Tion murmured to himself. He had already noticed the change in his sword will, but he didn't expect it to be so terrifying. Lil Lingyun wasn't weak, but Niet Tion was too strong. How is this possible? The scene high up in the sky shocked everyone. Many people rubbed their eyes with all their might, completely unable to believe what had just happened. One sword, just one sword, and Niet Tion defeated Lil Lingyun. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed it. Lil Lingyun was the leader of the Sky Sword Pavilion, and he was ranked among the strongest in the entire Holy Light region, or even the entire Sumi world. The fact that such a powerful figure couldn't even block a single sword strike from Niet Tion was simply unbelievable. Without a doubt, after that battle, Niet Tion's name would shake the entire Sumi world. Dad, are you all right? asked Lushan nervously when she saw that Lingyun was in a daze. Tian had already stopped attacking, which was a great honor for Lushan. Lushan couldn't say anything about it. I'm fine. After a long time, Lingyun finally came back to his senses. He was looking at Tian with an intense fear in his eyes. Lin Feng was also astonished. He could also defeat Lingyun, but he wouldn't be able to do it as easily as Tian. "Little boy, you're going to become famous," said the old sword cultivator while smiling. Tian looked embarrassed and shrugged his shoulders helplessly. He didn't want to attract other people's attention, but he had defeated Lingyun with one sword attack, which was too shocking. It would be difficult for him not to become famous. "Lin Feng, let's go and see the ancestor of the Celestial Sword Pavilion," said Tian. He didn't want to waste time. "All right," said Lin Feng while nodding. They were about to leave. Boom, boom, boom. At that moment, a loud explosion spread in the air. The crowd looked in the direction of the sound and saw a mountain explode. The mountain collapsed and rocks flew everywhere. A monstrous sword energy filled the air. Everybody's heart was pounding and their eyes were burning with excitement. "It's the Celestial Sword Mountain," said Lin Feng. "The ancestor has come out of his secluded meditation." When he finished talking, a silhouette flew out of the mountain. That silhouette was floating in the air, giving people the impression that he was peerless. Chapter 928. Patriarch Heavenly Sword. Knowing that the figure up in the sky was Patriarch Heavenly Sword, Tian reflexively narrowed his eyes. Patriarch Heavenly Sword was practically a godlike existence in Heavenly Sword Pavilion. It was no wonder why the members of Heavenly Sword Pavilion would show such reverence toward him. Patriarch. Seeing Patriarch Heavenly Sword's appearance, Lingyun felt as though he had grabbed onto a life-saving straw. He wailed, seemingly on the verge of tears. In the sky, Patriarch Heavenly Sword's figure flashed. He moved at an incredible speed, leaving behind a trail of sword light in the sky. His figure directly appeared in front of Tian, less than 100 meters away from the ladder. Tian looked at the person in front of him and couldn't help but narrow his eyes. Patriarch Heavenly Sword's strength had already reached level 8 of the Sky Human stage. It would appear that he was just one step away from breaking through to level 9 of the Sky Human stage. In the Shumi world, because of the existence of the planar restriction, the 9th level of Heaven Being was the peak of a martial artist's strength. The fact that Heavenly Sword Ancestor could reach such a level of strength was enough to prove that his martial arts talent was top-notch. However, that was not what Tian was concerned about. What truly surprised him was that Patriarch Heavenly Sword seemed to be several thousand years old. Thousands of years old was an age that couldn't possibly appear in humans. Human martial artists were restricted by their own martial bodies. Even if they reached 9th level Heavenly Emperor strength, they were also at most only 1,000 years old. Patriarch Heavenly Sword's strength was only at the 8th level of Heaven Realm. His lifespan was limited to around 900 years. How could he possibly live for several thousand years? What was even more bizarre was that Tian could sense that Patriarch Heavenly Sword's martial body was extremely strong. His vitality was abundant, and there were no signs of aging at all. It was as if he was in his prime. This discovery shocked Tian quite a bit, and his expression became conflicted. "You are the one who cleared the path of sealing swords." Patriarch Heavenly Sword's voice boomed like a bell. Ignoring the look of shock on Tian's face, he asked, Tian could not tell whether the other party was happy or angry. He nodded lightly. "Ha ha ha." Suddenly, Patriarch Heavenly Sword burst into wild laughter, as if he had lost his mind. Seeing the look on Patriarch Heavenly Sword's face, everyone there was stunned. Their mouths gaped open, unable to say anything. Was this still the dignified Patriarch Heavenly Sword? Had the old ancestor gone mad? Everyone had the same question on their minds, and they cast puzzled looks at Patriarch Heavenly Sword. Tian was also speechless, his face filled with black lines. No matter how you cut it, Patriarch Heavenly Sword was an old monster who had lived for several thousand years. Was there need to get so excited? Stinking brat, stop laughing. Right at this moment, a strange voice suddenly rang out. The voice belonged to none other than Senior Sword. However, only Nyetian and Patriarch Heavenly Sword could hear it. Master, it's really Master. Next, however, Patriarch Heavenly Sword grew even more deranged. Like a little child, he jumped up and down, shouting and jumping. Master! Hearing Patriarch Heavenly Sword's voice, everyone was taken aback once more. Jean de Bayo was taken aback. Then, he let out a strange cry and said, Heavenly Sword Ancestor is boss disciple. Nyetian was taken aback. It was true that he had many disciples. However, there was no way he would recognize Patriarch Heavenly Sword. Additionally, Patriarch Heavenly Sword had lived for thousands of years, far older than him. He's my disciple. Then, Senior Sword's voice rang out once more. He chuckled and said, Everything about this kid is fine. He's just a little crazy when he gets excited. You'll be fine after getting used to it. Your disciple? Nyetian was taken aback once more. His face was filled with disbelief. Senior Sword was just the inky jade dragon sword's weapon spirit. Moreover, he was just a clone. How could he have a disciple? Moreover, this disciple's identity was ridiculously high. He was Sky Sword Pavilion's Patriarch Heavenly Sword. Nyetian's head buzzed. He could barely wrap his head around it. The others were even more petrified. They all thought that Patriarch Heavenly Sword was referring to Nyetian. That kind of shock was indescribable. Liling regained his senses and rubbed his eyes desperately. He couldn't believe the scene in front of him. He even felt that he must be dreaming. However, this dream was a little too real. Master, you've really come back to life. Patriarch Heavenly Sword ignored the gazes of the others. He looked at Nyetian with a pleasantly surprised and excited expression. Don't be so excited. It's been thousands of years for a suitable person. Don't scare him, Senior Sword said in a bad mood. Obviously, the suitable person he was referring to was Nyetian. Nyetian's stiff expression changed a little. He swallowed his saliva. He still couldn't react. Young Master, how should I address you? Patriarch Heavenly Sword finally returned to normal. He seemed to have realized that the situation was not right. He calmed himself down and asked with a smile. His name is Nyetian. He'll be your boss from now on, Senior Sword said before Nyetian could speak. Yes. Patriarch Heavenly Sword nodded. Seeing Nyetian's puzzled expression, he said, Boss Nya, Sky Sword Pavilion was built by me. It was to find a suitable swordsman for Master. In the past thousands of years, you are the first to break through the bewildering illusion. If not for you, Master Soul would still be trapped inside the illusion. Building Sky Sword Pavilion to find a swordsman, bewildering illusion, trapped inside the illusion. Nyetian was dumbfounded. He connected the dots between Patriarch Heavenly Sword's words and gradually understood what had happened. Patriarch Heavenly Sword was Senior Sword's disciple. Senior Sword was trapped inside the bewildering illusion, the illusion of the sealed sword's path. Patriarch Heavenly Sword established Sky Sword Pavilion to attract sword geniuses to challenge the sealed sword's path. As long as the bewildering illusion was broken, Senior Sword's soul would be able to escape. In the past thousands of years, Nyetian was the first swordsman to break through the bewildering illusion and free Senior Sword's soul. Thus, Senior Sword recognized him as his master. Damn! This master and disciple set up a big trap for all the other swordsmen to fall into. After understanding everything, Nyetian cursed inwardly. Senior Sword and Patriarch Heavenly Sword had ulterior motives. They set up a big trap, waiting for the self-proclaimed geniuses to fall into it. No wonder the sealed sword's path was open to all swordsmen. It turned out they had ill intentions. Thankfully, Nyetian had appeared. Otherwise, who knows how many swordsmen's hearts would have been sealed inside the sealed sword's path. Nyetian, we master and disciple were forced to do this. Thankfully, you appeared. My good disciple's thousands of years of planning was not in vain. Senior Sword knew that Nyetian had understood everything. Thus, he chuckled to cover up the awkwardness. Nyetian revealed a bitter smile. He did not say anything. Those swordsmen who entered the sealed sword's path wanted to obtain some benefits from it. This was where the bait was placed. If the fish were not greedy, why would they fall for it? However, Nietian still had a question in his mind. How did Patriarch Heavenly Sword manage to live for so long? This did not conform to the common sense of the martial Tao. Boss Nya, I am not a complete human. Patriarch Heavenly Sword was very smart. He was able to tell what Nietian was thinking. However, he felt somewhat awkward and said, I am a mixed blood. A mixed blood? Nietian looked at Patriarch Heavenly Sword and was taken aback. Patriarch Heavenly Sword nodded his head and said, My father is a human. My mother is a smurf. Chapter 929. Nietian didn't expect that the great ancestor of Sky Sword was half human and half elf. No wonder he could live so long. The elves had the longest lifespan among all the races, even longer than the ancient dragon race. They could live for tens of thousands of years, which was almost immortal for human beings. Nietian observed carefully. The great ancestor of Sky Sword's appearance was slightly different from that of ordinary human beings. His ears were slightly pointed, and his eyes were dark blue. Maybe the great ancestor of Sky Sword had changed his appearance, because he didn't want others to know about his bloodline. In this world ruled by human warriors, the elves were not welcomed. Nietian still had some questions in his mind. Why was the Sword Elder sealed in the blurry illusion? Was he really a doppelganger of the Inkjade Dragon Sword? But he guessed that the Sword Elder wouldn't answer him, even if he asked. After completely calming down, Nietian looked at Patriarch Heavenly Sword with a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. Although he didn't know the background of the Sword Elder and the great ancestor of Sky Sword, his identity was different now. The great ancestor of Sky Sword had become his follower. Then the next step will be much easier. Sky Sword. Nietian opened his mouth, but he didn't know how to address the great ancestor of Sky Sword. My name is Jian-Shun. Boss, just call me by my name, the great ancestor of Sky Sword said with a smile. Nietian nodded and smiled. Jian-Shun, I have something to tell you. Sure. Jian-Shun nodded and said, Go ahead, boss. Great ancestor. At this time, before Nietian opened his mouth, Lingyun walked over and said, This is the man who took the Nirvana Sacred Heart of Sword Pavilion, and he also integrated the Road of Sealed Sword. He shut up. Before Lingyun could finish, the great ancestor of Sky Sword interrupted him and scolded him, Don't you see that I'm talking to boss? Don't interrupt me. Lingyun's eyes widened. What's going on? He had no idea what was going on, nor did he know about the relationship between Nietian and Patriarch Heavenly Sword. It would appear that Patriarch Heavenly Sword was very respectful towards Nietian. It was as though he was a subordinate, or rather, a junior. When the other members of the Sky Sword Pavilion saw this, their expressions, which had just turned for the better, froze again. What happened today was too strange, and everyone was completely baffled. Jian-Shun, let's talk somewhere else. Nietian didn't want to pay too much attention to Lingyun, so he directly said to Jian-Shun, All right, let's go to the main hall. Jian-Shun agreed and said to Lingyun, Boss and I will go to the main hall to discuss something. No one is allowed to approach the main hall. Yes. Lingyun came back to his senses, his expression extremely ugly. He lowered his head and agreed, not even having the courage to look at Nietian. Brother Lin, let's go together, said Nietian indifferently while looking at Lin Feng. The reason why Lin Feng couldn't pass the illusion wasn't because his sword skills weren't good enough. It was because his mental strength wasn't strong enough. The illusory realm that was able to trap Elder Jian was very powerful, and Nietian had almost lost his life there. After a short time, Nietian, Lin Feng, and Jian-Shun appeared in the main hall. Lingyun and the other members of the Sky Sword Pavilion were guarding outside the main hall, not daring to enter. Nietian didn't waste any time and told Jian-Shun everything that had happened. Surprisingly, such a thing happened. Jian-Shun frowned and shouted furiously, The Celestial Demon Cult is really audacious. Surprisingly, they dared attack Sky Sword Pavilion. It seems like I've been practicing for almost 100 years, and Sky Sword Pavilion's reputation has been declining day by day. Ancestor, what should we do next? Asked Lin Feng in a low voice. Are you Bosnia's friend? Jianshan looked at Lin Feng and said, From now on, you don't need to call me Ancestor, just call me Jianshan. I'm afraid that's not appropriate, said Lin Feng hesitantly. He was a rigid person, so it was difficult for him to call the ancestor of Sky Sword Pavilion by his name. There's nothing inappropriate about it. Jianshan smiled and said, Don't pay attention to those ordinary people outside. A sword cultivator must have his own attitude. Don't let other people's opinions influence your actions. Tian was surprised. Jianshan looked carefree, but he didn't expect him to be so good at saying things out of anger. Lin Feng, listen to Jianshan, said Tian indifferently. Lin Feng had no choice but to nod. Jianshan, what do you plan to do? Tian glanced at Jianshan and asked. No matter what, Sky Sword Pavilion was founded by Jianshan, so Tian didn't intend to make decisions for him. One word, fight. Jianshan smiled and said, I haven't fought for 100 years, so I need to relax. Do you have the confidence to defeat Heavenly Devil Cult Master? Tian was slightly speechless and couldn't help asking. Tian still didn't know how strong the Heavenly Demon Cult leader was. But he had seen Wang Yiping, who was as strong as Lilingyun. Wang Yiping was only the deputy cult leader. No one knew how strong the mysterious and cruel Heavenly Demon Cult leader Yu Shuang was. Yu Shuang was the person that Tian was most worried about. The Heavenly Demon Cult destroyed the Xianyu Empire and then attacked Sky Sword Pavilion. It seemed that they had a plan to annex the 5 great factions. Since they were so ambitious, Yu Shuang's strength couldn't be underestimated. Jianshan was very strong, but Tian wasn't sure if he could defeat Yu Shuang. At the same time, Tian had other worries. He had a feeling that the Heavenly Demon Cult had allies. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to annex the 5 great factions. She's just a Heavenly Demon Cult leader. I, Jianshan, am not afraid of her. Jianshan said confidently. Good. Tian nodded and said, In that case, let's go and get rid of Wang Yiping first. Wang Yiping was still in the Sword Pagoda. Although he wasn't a key figure, he was still the deputy cult leader, so it was better to get rid of him immediately. After discussing, the 3 of them rushed out of the Sky Sword Hall and toward the Sword Pagoda. Ancestor, the others exclaimed when they saw the figure of the ancestor of Sky, sword flashing away, and immediately followed him. Outside the Sword Pagoda, Tian and the other 2 appeared. Wang Yiping, you traitor, prepare to die. Jianshan was furious. His eyes were full of anger, and he attacked with sword essence. Bang! With a muffled sound, the Sword Pagoda suddenly shook, and the protective sword formation was directly broken. What a strong force! Seeing this scene, Tian couldn't help but be shocked. The protective sword formation outside the Sword Pagoda was very strong. It seemed to be an 8th-order sword formation, but it was broken by Jianshan in one move. His strength was beyond Tian's expectation. Old man, this. Lilingyun's figure appeared, and he looked embarrassed. He knew that the ancestor of Sky Sword must have listened to Tian and thought that Wang Yiping was a member of the Heavenly Demon Cult. However, it didn't seem good to break the Sword Pagoda before this matter was confirmed. Chapter 930. Lilingyun wanted to persuade the great ancestor of Sky Sword to reconsider what Tian had said, but the latter ordered him to enter the Sword Tower and catch Wang Yiping. Great ancestor, this. Lilingyun was embarrassed. He hesitated for a moment and said, Deputy Pavilion Leader Wang has been in Sky Sword Pavilion for hundreds of years. Just because of an outsider's provocation, you believe in his betrayal. I'm afraid this will disappoint everyone in Sky Sword Pavilion. What? Jianshan understood the meaning of Lilingyun's words, and his face darkened. He said, Lilingyun, who are you to teach me a lesson? I dare not. Lilingyun was frightened. His face turned pale, and he quickly lowered his head. If you dare not, then go in and catch Wang Yiping. Jianshan was completely angry. He didn't give Lilingyun a chance to explain, and shouted in a deep voice. Don't go. Before Lilin could speak, Tian frowned and said, Wang Yiping has escaped. Escaped? Jian Chun was surprised, and then his figure flashed into the sword tower. After a while, Jian Chun walked out of the sword tower and said angrily, That bastard really escaped. Tian's divine sense was very powerful. He sensed that the whole sword tower was empty. Really? Lilin was stunned. He didn't believe it. Why would I lie to you? Jian Chun was angry. If it weren't for Lilin identity, he would have cursed him. Lilin was confused and hesitated. Why did he escape? Idiot. Jian Chun looked at Lilin cold. He couldn't bear it anymore, and said angrily, His identity has been exposed. Why didn't he escape? Did he just sit there and wait for death? Tian raised the corner of his mouth helplessly. It must be that Wang Yiping was alarmed when the sword recognized him as its master. Wang Yiping knew something and escaped. Is he really? Lilin still didn't want to believe Wang Yiping's betrayal. He suddenly thought of something and shouted to a man behind him, Bring Fong Mu and Fong Lin here. Yes. That person didn't know what was going on, so he answered and quickly left. Jian Chun was furious, but there was nothing he could do. Not long after, that person came back, followed by several people, each carrying a corpse on their shoulders. When Tian saw this, his face couldn't help but darken. He knew that things were bad. Fong Mu and Fong Lin might have already been rescued. What's going on? Lilin looked at the corpses on the ground. They were all law enforcement hall guards. Pavilion Master. This subordinate went to the law enforcement hall to find the two elders, Fong Mu and Fong Lin. They're no longer there. The guards of the law enforcement hall were also killed. The man said in panic. Lilin face stiffened. He felt a buzzing sound in his head and his body trembled, almost falling to the ground. At this point, no matter how stupid he was, he knew what was going on. Wang Yiping must have sensed something, so he went to find Fong Mu and Fong Lin. Then they told him what had happened, so the three of them directly escaped and killed the people of the law enforcement hall. Lilin was frozen on the spot, and his expression was extremely painful. Wang Yiping was his brother who had gone through fire and water with him. Why did he betray Sky Sword Pavilion? He couldn't figure it out. Lilin, do you know how stupid you are now? Jian Chun glanced at Lilin and said, Lilin coldly. Tian slightly waved his hand, signaling Jian Chun to stop talking. In fact, Lilin was also a person who valued friendship, but he was blinded by it. In other words, if someone said that Jean de Bayo wanted to kill Tian, he would never believe it. Lilin, you have made such a fatal mistake. The guards of the law enforcement hall were all killed because of your negligence. You don't deserve to be the pavilion master, Jian Chun said coldly without looking at Lilin. Hearing Jian Chun's words, everyone was shocked. No one had expected that the great ancestor of Sky Sword Pavilion would directly remove Lilin from the position of pavilion master. Lilin body trembled as if he had been struck by lightning. After a while, he slightly raised his head and said in a low voice, I made a wrong judgment and caused the people of the Sword Pavilion to be killed. I have betrayed Sky Sword Pavilion and the great ancestor. I don't deserve to be the pavilion master. Lilin words were painful and regretful. If he had listened to Tian, he wouldn't have been in such a situation. Let's leave it at that. Seeing that Lilin was sincerely regretful, Jian Chun didn't want to pursue further. He suddenly looked at Tian and said, The new pavilion master will be— Wait. Before Jian Chun could finish, Tian interrupted him and said, Actually, pavilion master Lu can't be blamed for this. I had some conflicts with Wang Yiping before, so it's reasonable that Pavilion Master Lu didn't believe me. Now that Sky Sword Pavilion is in a special situation, it's not appropriate to change the Pavilion Master. I think it's better to let Pavilion Master Lu continue to be the Pavilion Master. There are more important things to do. Tian could tell that Jian Chun intended to let him be the Pavilion Master of Sky Sword Pavilion. However, he really had no interest in the position of Pavilion Master. Moreover, Lilin was sincerely regretful. Removing the position of Pavilion Master was too much of a punishment. The Heavenly Demon cult definitely wouldn't give up on Sky Sword Pavilion just because Wang Yiping's identity was exposed. Next, the matter of fighting against the Heavenly Demon cult would be left to Lu Lingyun. Lu Lingyun was stunned and looked at Nie Tian in confusion. He didn't expect the latter to speak up for him. Jianshan looked at Nie Tian and knew that the latter didn't want to be the pavilion master of Sky Sword Pavilion. He could only give up and said to Lu Lingyun, "Before the matter of the Heavenly Demon cult is completely resolved, you will still be the pavilion master." Yes. Lu Lingyun was a little excited and said, "Lingyun will do my best to fight against the Heavenly Demon cult and not let the great ancestor down." Good. Jianshan nodded and waved his hand to signal everyone to disperse. Next, Nie Tian, Jianshan, and the others returned to the Sky Sword Hall. Nie Tian guessed that there must be other people in Sky Sword Pavilion who were persuaded by Wang Yiping to submit to the Heavenly Demon cult. However, there was no way to find these people one by one. Pavilion Master Lu restrained those who were close to Wang Yiping, Feng Mu, and Feng Lin, but don't do anything to them, Nie Tian said to Lu Lingyun after thinking for a while. Okay. Lu Lingyun was a smart person and naturally understood what Nie Tian meant. Those traitors of Sky Sword Pavilion had not done anything harmful to Sky Sword Pavilion yet, so there was no need to punish them. After the Heavenly Demon cult was eliminated, their rebellious intentions would naturally disappear. After everyone discussed other things, Nie Tian didn't stay any longer and directly left. After returning to his residence, Nie Tian entered his room and took a deep breath, preparing to examine his body. In the previous battle with Lu Lingyun, Nie Tian only used one move to completely defeat the other party. The improvement of his sword intent was very obvious. Nie Tian wanted to know what changes had happened to his sword intent after integrating the power of the Ink Jade Dragon Sword. A ball of sword intent light appeared in Nie Tian's palm. He carefully sensed it but didn't find anything unusual. There's no need to look anymore. Your sword intent has the power of sword patterns. Just as he was feeling puzzled, the Sword Elder's voice suddenly sounded. Chapter 9:31. The Power of Sword Pattern. Nie Tian was slightly moved and asked, "What kind of power is this?" In his previous life, he was already at the pinnacle of profound sword realm, but he had never heard of sword pattern. This was a completely new field for him. Little brat, yeah. Sword Elder laughed and said, "Your current sword realm is still not enough. Even if I tell you, you might not understand. You only need to know that sword pattern is a kind of power that is even more terrifying than profound sword. You have fused with some of the power of the Inky Jade Dragon sword pattern. Although you are only at the sword soul realm, you are much stronger than ordinary sword soul realm swordsmen. So that's how it is." Although he was already prepared in his heart, after hearing Sword Elder's words, Nie Tian was still quite shocked. There really was a sword realm that was higher than profound sword realm in this world. Why can't I feel the power of sword pattern in my sword intent? Nie Tian slightly calmed down and asked in shock. He was currently at the 4th level of Heaven Realm, and his mental power had reached level 84. In addition, his divine sense had fused with the mysterious Cauldron Divine Rune. His perception was comparable to a 9th-ranked alchemist. In this kind of situation, he actually couldn't even feel the power in his own sword intent. This was too strange. Slowly feel it. Enter your divine sense into the sword intent. Calm down and combine your divine sense with the sword intent. You will then be able to feel the existence of the sword pattern. Sword Elder said in a deep voice. His tone was slow, but it actually made Nie Tian enter a very mysterious state. Nie Tian felt that he was in a sea of sword intent. There were some black runes floating in the air like swimming tadpoles. Sword pattern. He immediately understood. These swimming tadpoles were the sword pattern that Sword Elder was talking about. This power, Nie Tian muttered to himself. He slightly frowned. The power of sword pattern was very mysterious. Every time he wanted to carefully feel it, the sword pattern would disappear. When he relaxed, the sword pattern would appear again. Nie Tian felt a familiar aura from the sword pattern. This aura was very similar to the divine rune on the Star Soul tablet. It seemed to be the same kind of power in different forms. The sword pattern slowly swam in the sea of sword intent and slowly fused with the sword intent. Nyetian could feel the subtle changes in the sword intent. It seemed that his sword intent had become pure, transforming into a non-attribute state. After a long time, Nyetian's divine sense came out of the sword intent. The experience earlier allowed him to thoroughly understand that the martial Tao world was far larger than he imagined. Above the heavenly emperor realm, there was surely the existence of the deity realm. Nyetian faintly felt that the power seemed to be able to surpass the heavenly emperor realm and reach the legendary divine realm. At this moment, the Sword Elder's expression was also a bit strange. He had already sensed the existence of a vast power from Nyetian. When he discovered the origin star stones, he was completely stunned. Nyetian, who exactly are you? The Sword Elder was shocked and said, "It seems like I have unintentionally chosen a monster." Nyetian, who exactly are you? Sword Elder was shocked and said, "It seems that I have unintentionally chosen a monster." The power of the origin star stone shocked even Sword Elder. He saw Nyetian as a monster. However, the entire Sky Sword Pavilion was in a state of high alert. Everyone knew that a short period of peace was the sign before the storm. However, the entire Sky Sword Pavilion was in a state of high alert. Everyone knew that the short period of peace was the sign before the storm. Nyetian let Liling Yun send people to search Sky Sword Mountain to find the location of Sky Demon Palace. However, there was no result. It has already been so long, but the Heavenly Demon Cult still hasn't made a move. They must be preparing again. If we still can't find the Heavenly Demon Palace, the Heavenly Sword Pavilion will be in danger. Nyetian murmured in the room. He made a decision. He would leave Sky Sword Pavilion personally tomorrow to look for Sky Demon Palace. He did not believe that such a huge Heavenly Devil Palace would not be able to conceal itself. And, right at this moment, Nyetian sensed a figure appear, and it was heading in his direction. It's him. Nyetian felt that this aura was very familiar. He could not help but tremble. He did not expect this person to appear here. The aura stopped for a moment and then left. He is looking for me. Nyetian immediately understood what the other person meant. Without delay, he left the room and chased after the person. The figure was extremely fast under the cover of night. Very quickly, he left Sky Sword Pavilion and came to a hidden valley. Nyetian's figure immediately arrived. When he saw the person's face clearly, he could not help but smile faintly and said, "Lin Feng, long time no see." That's right. The person was none other than Lin Feng, who entered the forbidden land of wind and cloud with Nyetian. Nyetian's eyes flickered. He indeed did not expect Lin Feng to appear at this time. Lin Feng did not say anything. Instead, he threw a scroll to Nyetian. This is... Nyetian caught the scroll and was stunned. This is the map of Sky Sword Mountain. The Sky Demon Cult is at the location I marked. Tonight, the Sky Demon Cult will make a move. Prepare yourselves, Lin Feng said faintly. Then, his figure flickered and he left. Nyetian looked at Lin Feng's figure, his gaze slightly trembling. He was very confused. Lin Feng was from the Sky Demon Cult. Why did he expose the Sky Demon Cult's location? Could he not be from the Sky Demon Cult? Nyetian frowned, his expression gradually darkening. Actually, he had already suspected Lin Feng's identity in the forbidden land of wind and cloud. The latter was clearly a swordsman, but he had always hidden his strength. He was only forced to use a black longsword at the most dangerous moment. After that, Lin Feng did not use the black sword again and continued to hide his strength. Now that he exposed the Sky Demon Cult's location to Nyetian, it was obvious that he wanted Sky Sword Pavilion and the Sky Demon Cult to fight to the death. Could he be from the 10,000 Demons Dragon Abyss? Nyetian suddenly thought of a possibility. Immediately, his back was drenched in sweat. If Sky Sword Pavilion and the Sky Demon Cult started a war, regardless of the result, the third party would definitely benefit. Who was this third party? The first person that Nyetian thought of was the 10,000 Demons Dragon Abyss, which had always wanted to invade Holy Light region. However, Lin Feng did not have a dragon vein. Could he be from the 10,000 Demons Dragon Abyss? Thinking of this, Nietian became more and more confused about Lin Feng's identity. However, he did not have much time to think now. The Sky Demon cult was going to make a move soon. He had to return immediately and inform Jian Shun and Liu Lingyun so that the people from Sky Sword Pavilion could prepare. After a while, Nietian appeared in the Sky Sword Hall. Jian Shun, Liu Lingyun, Sun Hai, and the other higher-ups of Sky Sword Pavilion had all arrived. Jian Shun, what is this place? Nietian was not familiar with Sky Sword Mountain. He pointed at a marked place on the map and asked. That was the location of the Sky Demon Palace that Lin Feng had mentioned. Chapter 9:32. The Sword Tomb. Upon hearing Jian Shen's words, Nietian was stunned. Are you sure? Of course. Jian Shen suddenly thought of something and said, Boss Nya, you're not telling me that demonic palace is in the Sword Tomb, are you? Nietian let out a long sigh of relief and nodded grimly. He hadn't expected this outcome either. Who would have thought that demonic palace was in the Sword Tomb? The demonic cult was really cunning. They built demonic palace in the Sword Tomb. Even if the people of Sky Sword Pavilion turned the entire Sky Sword Mountain upside down, they would not know where demonic palace was. Sigh, it's all my fault. At this time, Liu Lingyun suddenly sighed and said, Wang Yiping has always been in charge of the Sword Tomb. He must have built demonic palace in the Sword Tomb. Bastard. Jian Shan was even more furious and directly cursed. How dare he build demonic palace in the Sword Tomb? Wang Yiping, that bastard, I will skin him alive and grind his bones to ashes. Demonic palace being built in the Sword Tomb was a great humiliation to Sky Sword Pavilion. Jian Shun had founded Sky Sword Pavilion, so of course he was very angry. Nietian's face was also very gloomy. The demonic cult had lurked very deep. Demonic palace was in the Sword Tomb, almost right under his nose. If Lin Feng had not appeared, he would have searched all over the mountain, and in the end, he would not have found anything. Since it was confirmed that demonic palace was in the Sword Tomb, the next step was much easier. Jian Shun wanted to lead the people of Sky Sword Pavilion into the Sword Tomb and completely destroy the demonic cult. Nietian was a little hesitant. He felt that things were not as simple as he thought. After careful consideration, Nietian decided to enter the Sword Tomb with Jian Shun and Lin Feng first. Liu Lingyun and the others would guard outside the Sword Tomb. Nietian, Jian Shun, and Lin Feng were the three strongest people present. Once they entered the Sword Tomb, even if they encountered the main force of the demonic cult, they would at least be able to protect themselves. All right, Jian Shun readily agreed with Nietian's decision and roared, It's just a Sky Demon cult. I alone would be enough to destroy them. Nietian smiled. Jian Shun had lived for thousands of years, but he was still so impulsive. It was really not easy. Nietian repeatedly told Han Tian to protect the others. There was a possibility that the heavenly demon cult would rush out of the sword catacomb, so it would be fine as long as Han Tian and the others were not injured. After a while, Nietian arrived at the most mysterious place of the Sky Sword Pavilion, the Sword Tomb. The so-called Sword Grave was a huge graveyard where the souls of the past swordsmen of Sky Sword Pavilion were buried. Some powerful swordsmen had left behind sword intent inheritances that could be inherited by the fated ones. Lin Feng had already had the opportunity to go to the Grave of Swords, and he had the opportunity to obtain sword energy, but he had refused. The entrance to the grave was very narrow. It was only a few meters wide. Yet Tian, Jian Shun, and Lin Feng didn't hesitate and immediately entered. The moment he entered the Sword Tomb, Nietian felt a powerful sword intent rushing towards him, and the surrounding space surged with a cold intent. The heavenly demon cult built the demon palace in such a place. It is indeed very safe, said Nietian while looking at the Sword Tomb in front of him. There were sword spirits and sword intent floating everywhere, giving off a very gloomy feeling. The Sword Tomb was a forbidden place of Sky Sword Pavilion. Only the most outstanding disciples had the opportunity to go there and find opportunities to cultivate the Sword Tao. The Sword Tomb was very big. Nietian and the others slowly walked towards the depths of the Sword Tomb. I haven't been to the Sword Tomb for almost 100 years. The sword intent here is even stronger, murmured Jian Shun. He was walking in the front. He was the strongest among them, so if something unexpected happened, he would be the first to react. Nie Tian's nerves were stretched taut. He used his godly awareness to observe the surroundings to see if there were any hidden doors or formations. Nie Tian, it's on your left. At that moment, Elder Jian's voice suddenly rang out, reminding Nie Tian. Nie Tian was surprised. He looked at the stone wall on the left and immediately saw a strange pattern. There was a strange illusion formation on it, covering the qi. Corpse Luo, I'll leave it to you, said Nie Tian directly. This kind of small illusion formation was a piece of cake for Corpse Luo Demon King. Yes, master, replied Corpse Luo Demon King. It immediately appeared, and its small body stuck to the stone wall. Jian Shun and Lin Feng were surprised to see a spirit mouse. What kind of spirit beast is that? Elder Jian was also surprised. He didn't know about the existence of Corpse Luo Demon King, but the spirit mouse's qi was very strange. It seemed to have a human soul. This is my friend, said Nie Tian casually. He didn't explain too much. All right. While they were talking, Corpse Luo Demon King had already broken the illusion formation on the stone wall. His silhouette flickered, and he returned to the furnace of hell. Boom! At the moment when the illusion formation was broken, the stone wall shook violently. Then, a stone door appeared. The entrance to Demonic Palace. Jian Shun broke the stone door, and a deep passage appeared in front of them. Go in, said Jian Shun, and immediately walked in. Nie Tian and Lin Feng looked at each other and then followed. After walking for about a kilometer, Nie Tian heard a loud noise. It was coming towards them. Be careful, warned Nie Tian. He immediately became alert. Let them come. I want to kill to my heart's content, said Jian Shun with a gloomy smile. His whole body was filled with cold, killing qi. Who are you people? At that moment, a deep voice sounded. It turned into a strong wind and moved towards Nie Tian and the others. The people who will kill you, said Jian Shun with a cold smile. His body moved slightly, and he broke through the strong qi of the people coming towards him. In the next moment, a silhouette landed. He was followed by dozens of cultivators in black. Each of them had the strength of the celestial realm. Nie Tian, the leader's face darkened. He fixed his eyes on Nie Tian and said in surprise, Why are you here? Patriarch Yin, long time no see. Nie Tian smiled faintly and looked at the person in front of him with a strange smile. The person who came was none other than the patriarch of the Yun family, one of the 4 great families of the Black Moon Empire, Yun Ba. But now Nie Tian knew that Yun Ba's real identity was the southern overlord of the heavenly demon cult, one of the 4 kings of the heavenly demon cult. Nie Tian had seen Yun Ba once in the Sword Pagoda, but the latter didn't know. Nie Tian, didn't you die in the forbidden land of wind and cloud? Did you come out of the forbidden land? Yun Ba looked surprised. When Nie Tian went to the forbidden land of wind and cloud, he went to see him off. He originally thought that Nie Tian had died in the forbidden land of wind and cloud, but he was still alive. For hundreds of years, no one had come out of the forbidden land of wind and cloud alive. Yun Ba was surprised that Nie Tian could come out alive. With a cold laugh, a cold smile appeared at the corner of Nie Tian's mouth as he said, Of course you want me dead, Yun Ba, but I have to disappoint you. I'm still alive. Yun Ba's eyes trembled when he sensed that Nie Tian's strength had reached the 4th layer of the celestial realm. He looked at Jian Shun and Lin Feng next to him, and his expression stiffened. He then roared, Kill them. Chapter 9:33. Dozens of warriors of the celestial being realm rushed over together. Their momentum soared to the sky, and their unrestrained fighting spirit suddenly raged. These people of the Sky Demon cult cooperated very well. Their celestial being realm joined together, and like a giant net, it suddenly pressed over. Nie Tian felt the strong pressure, and his eyes narrowed slightly. You're courting death, Jian Shin shouted coldly. He did not care at all, and his figure shot out like a flowing light. Jian Shin's figure was like a sword, and his whole body was surging with a terrible killing intent. He rushed over like a wild beast. Boom! With a loud noise, the pressure of dozens of warriors of the celestial being realm was broken by Jianshun. The next moment, there was a burst of ghostly wails and wolf howls. Under the surging sword intent, more than 10 warriors in black fell to the ground dead. They were not weak, but it was a pity that Jianshun was too strong. They were not at the same level at all. The others all retreated, and their eyes flashed with fear. They could not believe that Jianshun's strength was so strong. Nietian smiled slightly. Jianshun was an old monster who had lived for thousands of years. Not only was he very strong, but he also had rich fighting experience. These people could not be his opponent at all. Who are you? Yunba's figure retreated rapidly, and his eyes were filled with fear as he shouted nervously. I founded the Sky Sword Pavilion. Who do you think I am? Jianshun roared, and his eyes were bloodshot. His whole body was surging with a strong, killing intent. You are great ancestor of Sky Sword? Yunba was stunned, and then he reacted. The fear in his eyes was even more intense. He did not expect that great ancestor of Sky Sword would come to the Sky Demon Palace. Knowing Jianshun's identity, Yunba was so shocked that he could not react for a moment, and his expression froze. Dying. At this moment, a cold voice rang out, after which the shadow of a sword whistled through the air, extremely sharp and cold. The next moment, the sword's shadow passed by, and Yunba did not have time to react. He was directly cut in half. In the last moment of Yunba's consciousness, he saw a cold face. It was Nietian. It was Nietian who attacked and killed Yunba in one move. Yunba was not weak, and he was already in the Sky Realm 5th Realm, but Nietian was stronger. In addition, Yunba was stunned for a moment, so he did not have the slightest ability to fight back. At that moment, Lin Feng also attacked. Countless sword shadows crazily rushed towards them. Their chi was incomparably strong. It was like a gust of wind sweeping away fallen leaves. More than 10 cultivators in black clothes died on the spot. In the blink of an eye, Nietian's group of 3 had killed Yunba and the dozens of black-clothed martial artists. Demonic Palace, today is your doomsday. Jianshun's killing intent was overwhelming. He roared and rushed forward. Nietian and Lin Feng didn't stop either and immediately followed him. A moment later, the 3 of them arrived at a huge plaza. At the center of the plaza was a huge altar. The Heavenly Demon Palace is actually so big. Nietian looked at the altar in front of him and was quite surprised. That altar was extremely strange. It released a black mist that was sinister and strange. It was suffused with the aura of death. People of the Heavenly Devil Palace, come out. Jianshun's figure moved, stepped into the void, and shouted. Nietian was speechless. Jianshun had lived for thousands of years in vain. He was too impulsive. If he did that, all the members of the Heavenly Demon Cult would come. Jianshun was extremely strong. He didn't even care about the leader of the Heavenly Demon Cult, so of course he dared to be arrogant. His arrogant voice fell, but the surroundings were silent. There was no response at all. A bunch of cowards. When Jianshun saw that nobody responded, he became even more furious. A terrifying sword energy emerged from his body. He looked at the gigantic altar and shouted furiously. Since you don't want to come out, I will destroy your altar. Boom. Jianshun's silhouette flickered and a monstrous sword energy filled the air. In his hand, an ice blue sword appeared. It was his original spirit sword against the water sword. Boom, boom, boom. A monstrous sword energy bloomed in the air. The altar suddenly shook as if it couldn't bear the pressure. Be careful. Nietian looked at the altar and suddenly sensed a monstrous strength. He was stupefied and shouted in fear. However, it was too late. Jianshun's sword had already landed. Jianshun's sword energy was very special. The sword light was dark blue in color, and a blue sword shadow appeared in the void. It was 1,000 meters long, and from afar, it looked like it was condensed from deep blue seawater. Boom! Almost at the same time, a ball of black brilliance was released from the black altar. It was incomparably violent and condensed into a black claw in the void. The black claw was incomparably sharp, and several black traces appeared in the void. A terrifying aura of death descended and shrouded the entire space. Oh no! Yet Tion's gaze trembled. He was very familiar with that ball of black brilliance. When he fought with Eugene, the latter's bloodline power, the blood jade demonic lotus, had the same black brilliance. Gaga. At this moment, a sinister laughter suddenly rang out in the void. It was extremely ear-piercing and filled the surrounding space. What the hell is that? Jinshin also realized that something was wrong at this moment. He let out a weird cry and wanted to retreat, but it was already too late. The black brilliance seemed to be integrated with the space. In an instant, the black claw directly fell on Jinshin's body. A tragic cry sounded. Jinshin's chest was directly pierced, and suddenly blood flowed out. Boy, Jinshin! The sudden scene caused the Sword Elder and Nietion's voices to ring out almost at the same time. Ignorant human, let me devour your soul. The black claw turned into a ball of black gas and wrapped around Jinshin, as if to completely devour him. The shrill voice resounded in the air, making people's hair stand on end. Get out of my way, Nietion roared. His figure was like lightning, turning into a stream of light and rushing towards the black gas. The power of thunder surged out of his body, dispersing the black fog in the space. The purple-gold lightning was like a long, shining snake, rolling down in an overwhelming manner. Roar! The power of thunder condensed into a thunder dragon, roaring towards the sky and directly rushing towards Jinshin. Jia. The black fog seemed to be aware of the danger and let out a strange cry. It was forced to retreat by the thunder dragon and had no choice but to give up Jinshin. Nietion stretched out his long arm and held Jinshin in his arms. He felt that the latter's breath was still there, but it was very weak. To Nietion's surprise, the wound on Jinshin's body did not heal, but continued to tear and expand, almost tearing his whole body apart. Nietion frowned, and several sword chi gushed out of his body, forcibly sealing the wound on Jinshin's body. At this moment, the black gas condensed into a ghost face. It was surprised, and its dark pupils shrank. It seemed to be very surprised and screamed, "Human boy, it's you again." Nietion was also stunned. Looking at the strange ghost face in front of him, he immediately understood that this was the ghost face he saw on Eugene's body. The strange ghost face was the same as when Nietion saw it for the first time. It was condensed by black brilliance, and there were black runes flowing in it, releasing the aura of death. Nietion, we finally meet. At this moment, another voice sounded, and immediately a figure appeared in the void. Chapter 934. What a powerful aura! As the black-robed figure appeared, a huge pressure appeared in the air, causing Nietion's body to shake and his breathing to quicken. The newcomer knew Nietion's name. A pair of pupils that were like black holes stared at Nietion with sharp killing intent. You're the leader of the heavenly demon cult, Yuru Shuang? Nietion frowned, immediately guessing her identity. It was a woman with terrifying strength. Aside from Yuru Shuang, Nietion couldn't think of a second person who would appear on the altar of the heavenly demon cult. His guess was correct. The newcomer was none other than the leader of the heavenly demon cult, Yuru Shuang. Very well, you know my name. Yuru Shuang smiled cold, her tone tinged with mockery. Now that you mention it, I have to thank you. If not for you, Eugene and Lin Feng would not have been able to escape the forbidden land of wind and cloud. Nietion's expression darkened as he probed with his divine sense. He couldn't help but tremble. Yuru Shuang's strength was in the 8th level of the celestial being realm. No wonder her aura was so powerful. Although Nietion had never met Yuru Shuang, he had long heard of her name and seen her methods. Xian Xiao had become a murderous monster thanks to her. Judging from the way Yuru Shuang had treated Xian Xiao, she was an extremely sinister person. Yuru Shuang seemed to be able to see through Nietion's thoughts. She smiled sinisterly and provocatively. A woman can support a sect comparable to a first-rate power. How could she not be ruthless? She seemed to be able to see through Nie Tian's thoughts. Nie Tian stared at Yuru Shuang, not daring to be the slightest bit careless. Jian Shun was already seriously injured and had completely lost the ability to fight. It would be very difficult for him and Lin Feng to defeat Yuru Shuang. Nie Tian glanced at the strange ghost face. He had a vague feeling that he had fallen into Yuru Shuang's trap. Leader! At that moment, a figure appeared behind Yuru Shuang. Nie Tian's face stiffened when he saw the person's face. It was Lin Feng. Lin Feng, you've done well. Patriarch's celestial sword has indeed appeared. Yuru Shuang smiled sinisterly, as if she was speaking to Nie Tian. Lin Feng did not say anything. His face was cold, and there was nothing strange about it. You lured us here on purpose, Nie Tian exclaimed as he looked at Lin Feng. At this moment, he understood everything. Lin Feng had leaked the location of the Heavenly Devil Palace to Nie Tian on Yuru Shuang's orders. Yes, Lin Feng was very straightforward. He nodded solemnly, his face still expressionless. The corner of Nie Tian's eyes twitched. He didn't expect that he would fail miserably in such a simple task. Yuru Shuang had told Lin Fenggu to tell Nie Tian that the Heavenly Sword Patriarch was in the Sword Catacomb. She must have expected him to fly into a rage. Then, he would charge into the demonic palace. Yinba was just bait. Although the bait was dead, it was nothing to Yuru Shuang. The blood altar in front of them was specially prepared for Patriarch Celestial Sword. Humph! Yuru Shuang's eyes flashed and fell on Jian Shun. She smiled coldly. I've long heard that Patriarch Celestial Sword is a hot-tempered fool. Today, I see that he lives up to his reputation. How dare he charge into the Blood Demon altar? He's courting death. The Blood Demon altar. Before Yuru Shuang's voice had died away, the Sword Elder's scream rang in Nie Tian's mind. It's the Blood Demon clan. The Blood Demon clan? Nie Tian was taken aback by the Sword Elder's scream. He had never heard of the Blood Demon clan. But if the Sword Elder was so surprised, it must be extraordinary. I didn't expect that someone from a Blood Demon clan could survive to this day. No wonder Jian Shun was no match for him. The Sword Elder was astonished, his eyes filled with horror. Sword Elder, what is the Blood Demon clan? Seeing the Sword Elder's expression, Nie Tian couldn't help but ask. The Blood Demon clan is one of the 12 ancient demon clans. They are the nemesis of the Blue Fairy clan. The Sword Elder said in horror. This person must know Jian Chen's identity. This Blood Demon clan is here to deal with Jian Chen. Ancient Demon Clan. Nie Tian's eyes darkened. His eyes suddenly flashed as he looked at the demonic face. At this time, Yuru Shuang's cold laughter rang out. Patriarch Celestial Sword, since our sect wants to annex Sky Sword Pavilion, how can we not know your background? Only a mixed blood of humans and fairies can live for so long. Your blue fairy bloodline is the key to your defeat. Nie Tian frowned even more. The blood on Jian Chen's body was not pure red, but had a faint blue color. It was because of the ordinary blue fairy bloodline in his body. The Blue Fairy clan was considered an unusual species among the fairies. They had both water and earth attributes. The most obvious characteristic was that their blood was blue and their vitality was strong. Their physique was also the strongest among the fairies. However, the Sword Elder had said that the Blood Demon clan was the nemesis of the Blue Fairy clan, so it was not surprising that Jian Shun was defeated by the ghostly face. Today is the doomsday of Sky Sword Pavilion, shouted Yuru Shuang. Her voice became shrill and her aura surged. A blood-red lotus appeared behind her, illuminating the sky red. Blood Jade Demonic Lotus. Nie Tian's eyes suddenly darkened. This was the power of the Yu family's bloodline. Nie Tian had seen the Blood Jade Demonic Lotus on Eugene before, but it was far less terrifying than Yuru Shuang's. You two prepare to die, Yuru Shuang roared. The demonic lotus bloomed behind her. A powerful force surged out like ripples, oppressing the space and making Nie Tian feel suffocated. Yuru Shuang, I'll help you kill Sky Sword Ancestor. Don't forget our agreement. The Empyrean demon Saintus is mine." The blood demon let out a strange cry. The ghostly face shrank and disappeared into the blood demon altar. "Blood spirit slaughtering. I'm not a person who goes back on his word. You can have that girl Eugene reincarnated." Yu Rushuang's lips curled into a smile. Upon hearing their words, Nietion's pupils slightly shrank. These two actually had an agreement. The blood demon blood spirit slaughtering would kill Sky's sword ancestor for Yu Rushuang, and Yu Rushuang would give Eugene to the former. Eugene was the Empyrean demon Saintus and a descendant of a Yu family. Yu Rushuang had actually used her own descendant to make a deal. "Yu Rushuang, I can't believe you used Eugene to make a deal with a blood demon. She's from the Yu clan. You're worse than an animal." Nietion was enraged. With a wave of his hand, he sent Jin Chun high into the air. Even if Yu Rushuang was strong, Nietion was not afraid of fighting her. Chapter 9:35. Nietion's face darkened when he sensed the pressure coming from the void. He felt as if a huge boulder was pressing down on his chest, making it hard for him to breathe. Yu Rushuang was very strong. Not only was her cultivation far higher than his, but the bloodline power of the Blood Jade Lotus was even more terrifying. Just this kind of pressure was enough to make Nietion feel strained. "Nietion, this woman's bloodline power is very strong. She seems to have fused with the power of the Blood Demon clan. Be careful," the Sword Elder warned Nietion. "All right," Nietion nodded. He didn't know how Yu Rushuang could be related to an ancient beast, but what she had done was enough for her to die 1,000 times over. Boom! Nietion's chi sword. He activated the sword of the divine wheel and fused it with the power of the celestial field, breaking through the frozen space in front of him. His complexion also improved a little. "I'll help you," shouted Lin Feng. A terrifying sword intent surged in the air. The dragon chant sword swept past, tearing apart the frozen space. Almost at the same time, Lin Feng appeared. He looked at Lin Feng and said coldly, "Your opponent is me." "You?" Lin Feng's eyes narrowed. Lin Feng gave him a very strange feeling, as if the two of them had known each other for a long time. Looking at the two of them, Nietion also felt a trace of a similar aura from them. Adding on the fact that the two of them had similar names, he faintly felt that the relationship between the two of them was not ordinary. Lin Feng and Lin Feng were both in the 5th tier of the celestial human realm. Lin Feng was a swordsman at the Sword Soul realm. He was definitely at the peak of swordsmanship in the Shumi world. He could kill an ordinary warrior in the 5th tier of the celestial human realm with a single sword strike. However, Lin Feng's strength was also very strange. After being nourished by the Qilin's precious blood, his cultivation had also reached the 5th tier of the celestial human realm. Moreover, Nietion knew that he had been hiding his strength. His real battle strength was still unknown. It was hard to say who would win in a battle between Lin Feng and Lin Feng. Two figures soared into the sky. Without saying a word, they began to fight. Lin Feng was the first to attack. His first attack was the piercing sun's rainbow. His silhouette was extremely fast, and his sword energy was extremely pure. It was enough to make any sword cultivator shiver in fear. Swoosh! Whoosh! In the void, two crimson sword lights were like two meteors. They were extremely fast, leaving behind two glaring marks as they attacked Lin Feng. Facing this powerful sword, a pair of black wings appeared on Lin Feng's back, instantly condensing into a black longsword. It was the longsword that Nietion had seen before. Boom! A ray of black light whizzed through the air like a huge black snake, causing the void to tremble. Boom! The first move collided, and a terrifying power bloomed in the space. Endless black and red light wreaked havoc, and the two figures retreated. The two of them were equally matched in strength, and it would be difficult to determine the victor in a short period of time. Nietion withdrew his gaze and locked onto Yu Rushuang. She was his most terrifying opponent. "You're courting death." Yu Rushuang could sense Nietion's intense battle intent. She smiled coldly and mockingly said, "A little loach wants to fight a dragon? You're overestimating yourself. In Yu Rushuang's eyes, Sky Sword Pavilion's greatest support was Ancestor Sky Sword. He was also someone she had always feared. As long as he died, the others would be nothing. As for Nie Tian, he was just a loach that had appeared out of nowhere. She didn't care about him at all. If Nie Tian hadn't come out of the forbidden land of wind and cloud alive, Yu Rushuang wouldn't have even heard of his name. Yu Rushuang, you're overconfident. Nie Tianling smiled calmly. His eyes were frighteningly calm. Immediately after, he moved. The heavenly slash of the sword emitted an intense sword cry that resounded through the sky, causing the frozen space to tremble. Suddenly, endless thunder force surged out. The violet gold thunder force condensed into 9 purple thunderbolts that surged toward Yu Rushuang. Nie Tian had not only used thunder force in this move, but he had also combined the power of the War God Art's 9 heavenly strikes. He had a feeling that the War God Art could bring out the full potential of Thunder Force. Oh! Yu Rushuang's eyes narrowed as she looked at the 9 thunderbolts. Nie Tian's strength had slightly exceeded her expectations. Demonic Lotus devours the world. The next moment, her eyes regained their calm. The corner of her mouth twitched as a demonic lotus petal flew out from behind her. It instantly grew to thousands of meters tall, like a curtain that blotted out the sky as it came crashing down. The 9 thunderbolts bombarded the demonic lotus petal, and a strange scene ensued. The demonic lotus petal wasn't damaged in the slightest. It directly devoured the thunder force. What? Nie Tian hadn't expected Yu Rushuang's blood jade demonic lotus to be so powerful that it could directly devour the thunder force. Bang! The next moment, a powerful aura pressed down on him. With a muffled sound, Nie Tian's body trembled as he was sent flying. Nie Tian steadied himself and spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was filled with shock. Yu Rushuang's power had far exceeded Nie Tian's expectations. Just one move was enough to make him cough up blood. Even stranger was the fact that the bloodline power of her blood jade, demonic lotus, was extremely terrifying. It seemed to possess a powerful devouring attribute that could devour all kinds of power. Nie Tian's thunder force also possessed a devouring attribute, but it wasn't strong enough. It was much weaker than the blood jade, demonic lotus. Oh! Yu Rushuang's attack had injured Nie Tian, but her eyes were not filled with joy, but shock. Although the move just now was not her full strength, it was enough to kill a martial artist in the 6th level of the Heaven-Human realm. Nie Tian was only in the 4th level of the Heaven-Human realm, but he was able to take this attack head-on. Nie Tian, your strength has astonished me. Yu Rushuang's eyes trembled, but then she smiled cold. But that's all. Nie Tian's strength had exceeded her expectations, but it was far from enough to make her feel apprehensive. Is that so? Nie Tianling sneered and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. His eyes were filled with determination. That move just now was just a test. The real battle was about to begin. Nie Tian's body shook as he shot into the sky. The air trembled and the frozen space exploded. What a powerful aura! Yu Rushuang's eyes darkened. It seemed that she had still underestimated Nie Tian's strength. Feeling Nie Tian's powerful aura, Yu Rushuang's eyes became a bit solemn. Only now did she realize that Nie Tian wasn't some small fry she could kill at will. Demonic Lotus Night Kill. Yu Rushuang growled, not wanting to waste any more time. The blood jade demonic lotus behind her suddenly shot out a beam of black light. A black trajectory appeared in the sky. It was incomparably evil as it rolled toward Nie Tian. Chapter 9:36. Nie Tian stood in the air like a sword. Suddenly, he felt a vast force pressing down on him, causing his eyes to widen involuntarily. The power of the blood demon. Nie Tian's heart trembled slightly. He could vaguely see the power of black magical symbols surging within the black light, which were exactly the same as the magical symbols he had seen in the devilish ghost face. What a terrifying power! Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. Only now did he realize just how terrifying the power of the Blood Demon clan was. It was easy to understand. Since the Blood Demon clan was one of the 12 ancient demon clans, it was only natural that their power was terrifying. Tion could sense that the power of the Blood Demon clan was far more than that. It was just that Yu Rushuang's Blood Jade demonic lotus had not completely merged with the Blood Demon clan's power, so she was unable to bring out the true power of the Blood Demon clan. Even so, Yu Rushuang's Blood Demon clan's power was enough to make Tion feel a terrible threat. God-chilling sword. Tion roared and slashed out with his sword. At the same time, he retreated to avoid the Blood Jade demonic lotus's attack. Boom! The sky shook violently. The 1,000-meter sword shadow was unable to withstand the Blood Jade demonic lotus and was directly destroyed. A terrible aura of death descended upon Tion. The sudden pressure caused Tion to cry out involuntarily. In the next instant, a terrifying force directly seeped into his body, bombarding his limbs and meridians. Roar! The 9 dragon veins were attacked. A terrible thunder power was stimulated. A dragon's roar rang out inside his body, causing him to tremble violently. The blood demon chi and the thunder power clashed in Tion's body. A terrible pain surged through him. The heart-wrenching pain caused Tion's face to contort. The power in his body was about to tear him apart. Yu Rushuang, who was watching from the side, let out a sound of surprise. Tion should have been instantly devoured by the Blood Demon clan's power. How could he still have the power to resist? Yu Rushuang, don't underestimate this silver-haired brat. He has a powerful energy within him that even I fear. Don't hesitate. Just kill him. At this moment, the voice of the blood slaughter spirit echoed from the Blood Demon altar. All right. Yu Rushuang also felt that something was wrong. Tion had amazed her time and time again, so it was best to get rid of him as soon as possible. Demonic Lotus Hand. Yu Rushuang didn't hesitate. The Blood Jade Lotus behind her suddenly went berserk. A scarlet power spread out, and a blood-red hand appeared in the sky, grabbing at Tion. Lin Feng was on the other side, and when he saw that Tion was in danger, he couldn't help but shout in fear. Unfortunately, he was fighting with Lin Feng and couldn't help Tion. Tion, your lightning power is stronger than the Blood Demon Chi. Defeat it quickly. The Sword Saint's nervous voice rang out in his mind. He had waited hundreds of thousands of years for a suitable candidate like Tion. He didn't want to see him die. If Tion died, the Sword Saint's remnant soul would lose its host and would dissipate. Boom! At this moment, the demonic Lotus Hand had already arrived. If it caught Tion, he would certainly be crushed to a pulp. Tion was currently struggling fiercely. He was drenched in sweat and had no strength to fight back. Xian Xiao, shouted Tion suddenly. The Hellfire Crucible appeared behind him, and a figure jumped out. It was Xian Xiao. Roar! Xian Xiao appeared and roared. Blood Jade mystical sand surged out of his body and condensed into a giant blood-red hand in the air. Boom! The 2 blood-red palm prints collided in the air, causing the void space to tremble violently. A terrifying blood-red wave of air, visible to the naked eye, appeared in the sky. Xian Zhao's body swayed, and he screamed. Like a kite with its string cut, he flew back and smashed into the ground, stirring up a wave of dirt. Damn it! Yu Rushuang's killing move had been destroyed by Xian Xiao. She couldn't help being furious and slammed her palm into the ground. Boom! A huge crater appeared in the ground. Xian Zhao's body was smashed into the crater and disappeared. At almost the same time, an angry roar rang out. Tion's body shook, and he spat out a mouthful of blood-red chi. He had forced out the blood demon chi in his body. Xian Xiao. Tion stabilized his body and sent out his divine sense. He couldn't sense Xian Zhao's aura. His eyes were bloodshot and filled with killing intent. Genius of the Xian family, dog shit, Yu Rushuang shouted coldly. The black robe on her head was suddenly lifted, revealing an extremely demonic face. It was an extremely terrifying face. Flesh and blood were rotting, and one could even see the eerie white bones. Oh, Nietion's expression darkened when he saw Yu Shuang's face. Nietion, this is the result of her forcibly fusing with the power of the blood demon. Not only her face, I think even her body is equally terrifying. The sword elder reminded Nietion and said in a deep voice. Nietion looked at Yu Shuang's face and thought of her body. Goosebumps rose all over his body. Yu Shuang's heart was simply unimaginable. She was vicious not only to others, but also to herself. In order to increase her strength, she had forcibly merged with the blood demon Qi. That was insane. The power of the ancient demon race was not so easy to obtain. Nietion, it seems that Mo Biming has already died at your hands. Yu Shuang looked coldly at Nietion and smiled coldly. Xian Xiao had originally been in Mo Biming's hands, but now he was with Nietion. This could only mean that Mo Biming was dead. But she was wrong. Mo Biming was not dead. He had only escaped. Not only will he die at my hands, but you will also die at my hands. Nie Tianling smiled coldly. Yu Shuang's tone was extremely disdainful. She did not care about Nie Tian at all. If Xian Xiao had not appeared just now, Nie Tian would already be a corpse. Me? Nie Tianling replied coldly. His aura surged, and a violent sword intent was released. A powerful sword aura bloomed in the air, causing the void to tremble violently. Oomph! Yu Shuang could sense that Nietian's aura had grown stronger, but her eyes were filled with disdain. She was confident that she could take Nietian's life with her next move. She did not want to waste any more time with Nietian because there was a fierce battle going on in Sky Sword Pavilion. Only Yu Shuang and a few others remained in the palace. The others had already charged into the Sky Sword Pavilion. As long as Yu Shuang and Lin Feng could finish off Nietian and Lin Feng, Sky Sword Pavilion would be completely destroyed. Yu Shuang's eyes became even more ferocious. Boundless killing intent condensed into a solid form and surged towards Nietian. Sword Heart Ending Moon. Nietian stood tall in the sky, sword intent surging around him. His sword aura condensed to the extreme as he slashed out with the sword Absolute Cleave. The sword radiance shot tens of thousands of meters into the sky, its soaring sword intent threatening to tear the world apart. Chapter 9:37. Nietian's figure whizzed forward like a bolt of lightning. In the void, a majestic sword shadow appeared, with a mighty momentum rolling over. Dark clouds churned, and the sky changed color. It was as if the only thing that existed in the world was sword intent. What a powerful sword intent! Yu Shuang's eyes narrowed when she saw Nie Tian's aura. The blood jade lotus behind her blossomed, fusing with the power of the blood demon. When it fully bloomed, it filled the space within 10,000 meters. Yu Shuang's bloodline power was already stronger than Yu Jin's. Now that she had fused with the power of the blood demon, its power was unimaginable. Up in the sky, the lotus bloomed, and the aura of death filled the air. What a powerful blood demon power! Nietian couldn't help but furrow his brows as he sensed the smell of blood assaulting his nostrils. However, he sped up and dashed straight towards the source of the smell. Yu Shuang, I didn't expect that the bit of blood demon power I gave you would be able to unleash such power. You've amazed me. The voice of the blood-slaughtered spirit rang out once more. At the same time, the blood demon altar shot out a black mist that melted directly into the blooming lotus. Instantly, the blood jade demonic lotus became even more violent. Black tentacles grew out of its body, as if thousands of snakes were dancing. Die! Yu Shuang shouted. The enormous power of the blood jade lotus surged out and pressed down on Nietian. Rumble! The sky shook as the fiercest collision erupted with the most terrifying power. Space suddenly froze. The next moment, the soaring sword light was swallowed by the blood jade lotus. Nietian's figure was also swallowed by it. Not good. Surrounded by the power of the blood jade lotus, Nietian sensed that something was wrong. A strange power crazily surged into his body. Break! Throwing caution to the wind, Nietian activated the sky shrouding totem. Starlight flashed, and the power of the stars forced open a space. Battle, God heavenly slash. After taking a deep breath, Nietion's entire body surged with the power of thunder. He slashed out with his sword, and a huge sword image appeared. The totem that covered the sky wrapped around the sword image. From afar, the huge sword image looked like it was condensed from starlight. Bang! With a muffled sound, the sword shadow rushed out of the thousands of demonic lotuses, creating a path. Nietion's figure flashed and rushed out. Not dead. Yuru Shuang was flabbergasted to see Nietion reappear. She hadn't expected that Nietion would be able to escape from the blood jade, demonic lotus. Nietion stood in the air, his entire body dripping with blood. The blood jade demonic lotus that had fused with the power of the blood demon was too terrifying. Just the terrifying aura alone was enough to tear his skin apart. What a terrifying power! Within Nietion's sea of consciousness, Sword Elder could not help but exclaim. This was the first time he had seen Nietion use the power of the stars. That kind of majestic power was too terrifying, and even he felt a deep sense of dread. Sword Elder even felt that if Nietion could completely control this power, it would definitely be even more terrifying than the power of the Ink Jade Dragon Sword itself. Nietion, it seems that it wasn't your luck that I chose you. Sword Elder couldn't help but say to himself. Of course, Nietion had no idea what the Sword Elder was thinking. His gaze was fixed on Yuru Shuang. She was one of the strongest enemies he had ever encountered. I have to get close to her. That's the only way absolute tremor can be used to its greatest effect. Nietion's gaze was resolute as he murmured to himself. The reason he hadn't used absolute tremor was because he hadn't found the right opportunity. It was his greatest trump card, and he needed to be certain he could kill her in one blow. Yuru Shuang, this kid can use mental attacks. Be careful. Spirit Bloodbath's voice rang out, warning Yuru Shuang to be careful. Spirit Bloodbath also realized that Nietion's battle prowess was far more terrifying than it seemed on the surface. It wouldn't be easy for Yuru Shuang to kill him. Nietion, I don't care what kind of power you have hidden in your body. You must die today. Yuru Shuang's gaze darkened, and her killing intent intensified. She had a feeling that if she couldn't kill Nietion today, she wouldn't have another chance in the future. Nietion was too terrifying. He was only at the 4th layer of the sky human realm, but he was already able to fight her head-on. Once he grew stronger, it would be unimaginable. You talk too much, Nietion sneered. His body shook, and the blood on his body disappeared. His aura became even sharper. Spirit Bloodbath had already warned Yuru Shuang, so she would definitely be very careful. If Nietion wanted to use absolute tremor again, his chances of success would be even slimmer. Demonic Lotus Weep. Yuru Shuang was furious. The blood jade demonic lotus bloomed even more wantonly, and the aura of death in the air thickened. The blood jade demonic lotus released a blood-colored light that pounced at Nietion. Barrier. Nietion's expression turned grim when he sensed that the powerful ward was trying to seal his vital meridians. He immediately formed hand seals, and a streak of golden light descended from the sky. It was none other than the soul-severing heavenly seal, the most powerful of the 3 seals of the god of battle. Bang! The soul-severing seal collided with the demonic lotus weep barrier. With a muffled sound, the 2 forces were annihilated. Nietion and Yuru Shuang retreated a few hundred meters at the same time, but their expressions were completely different. Yuru Shuang was furious. This was the first time Nietion had forced her back. It seemed that he was getting stronger. Nietion's expression was calm, without the slightest ripple. The more calm he was, the angrier Yuru Shuang became. Nietion, I didn't want to use this move, but you forced my hand. Yuru Shuang's body trembled slightly. A layer of black mist suddenly surged from her body, causing the aura of death in the air to grow even thicker. Oh! Nietion's eyes narrowed when he sensed the disturbance in the air. He knew that Yuru Shuang was about to use her strongest move. Nietion, I didn't expect you to be so strong. No wonder you were able to leave the forbidden land of wind and cloud alive. It seems that I've underestimated you. Yu Rushuang's figure slowly rose, and the black mist around her became thicker and thicker until it completely enveloped the blood jade demonic lotus. The crimson lotus had turned an eerie black, and it was filled with a demonic aura. Nietian, be careful. She's using the power of the blood demon to its fullest. The sword elder cried out, his voice trembling. Yu Rushuang was not actually very strong. In the eyes of the sword elder, she was so weak that he couldn't even look at her. But to the current Nietian, she was strong enough to threaten Nietian's life. Nietian nodded grimly. He released all of his blood chi, and his sword intent surged. At this moment, he could only face it head-on. His sword intent wreaked havoc in the air. Amidst the blood chi, formation runes appeared and circulated around Nietian. Nietian was prepared to receive Yu Rushuang's strongest move with the sword sealing restriction formation. Chapter 9:38. Up in the sky, the black lotus bloomed and the entire sky darkened. Only the sword aura around Nietian shone brightly, making him look like a small boat in a raging sea. Die! Yu Rushuang shouted viciously. The black lotus was like a mountain, but it moved with incredible speed toward Nietian. Nietian's face turned red, and his breathing became ragged. His entire body was drenched in cold sweat, but the determination in his eyes never wavered. Blood chi surged, and sword intent surged. The sword sealing restriction formation was activated. Nietian carefully sensed every strand of power within the sword intent. At the same time, he poured all of his astral energy into the sword intent. In this moment of life and death, he suddenly closed his eyes, and his divine sense entered a mysterious state. Within the sword sealing restriction formation, the sword intent surged with the power of the sword runes. As the astral energy poured in, the runes seemed to be stimulated and slowly became berserk. Nietian sensed the change in the runes and poured even more astral energy into them. The runes seemed to be boiling as they crazily attacked the sword sealing restriction formation. With the support of the sword runes, the power of the runes multiplied. The vast power of the formation seemed to be able to pierce through the darkness. Boom! However, at that very moment, the black lotus came crashing down from the sky. A terrifying pressure rolled out, almost suffocating Nietian. This kind of power was too terrifying. There was no way to defend against it. He could only endure it. Sword Dragon devours the world. Just as the black lotus pressed down, Nietian let out a furious roar. The power of the sword sealing restrictive formation instantly erupted, and a huge sword dragon appeared in the void. A boundless dragon aura spread out, and it resisted the power of the black lotus. Rumble! Terrifying sounds rang out in the sky. The two powers were too strong. They fought and devoured each other, unable to completely overwhelm each other. Oh! Yu Rushuang was stunned to see that the black lotus had failed to kill Nietian. Instead, it had fallen into a stalemate. Her scarred face trembled and became even more ferocious. The 9 dragon veins in Nietian's body revolved crazily, and the realm origin formation rumbled incessantly. At the same time, blood chi constantly surged out of his body. This was a battle of life and death. He had to give it his all. At this time, if he relaxed even a little bit, he would definitely die. Boom! The two powerful forces collided with each other, and the space couldn't bear it. The space let out a groaning sound, and faintly, one could see space cracks appearing and disappearing. Nietian, it's impossible for you to be a match for my sect. Die! Yu Rushuang seemed to have gone mad. The black mist around her rose once more, and the aura of the black lotus suddenly surged. Roar dash! The sword dragon suffered a huge blow and immediately let out a mournful wail. At this time, Nietian felt that the sword dragon's aura was becoming weaker and weaker. The huge black lotus was devouring the sword dragon's power. Oh no! Nietian's eyes trembled violently as a bad premonition arose in his heart. His sword, sealing restriction formation, had been able to resist the Black Lotus because the power of the stars had stimulated the power of the sword runes. That was why he could face Yu Shuang head-on. But if the sword dragon was devoured by the Black Lotus, his power would also be greatly reduced. At that time, he would be in danger. I'll go all out. In this moment of life and death, Nie Tian was extremely calm. He made up his mind and charged toward the Black Lotus. At this time, if the sword dragon couldn't resist the Black Lotus, Nie Tian would be directly devoured by it. Not even his corpse would be left behind. Nie Tian had no better choice. He could only fight with his life on the line. Yu Shuang saw Nie Tian suddenly rush over. Cold, she spat out 2 words, "You're courting death." If Nie Tian had chosen to run now, he might have had a chance to survive. Who would have thought that he would run over to die? Nie Tian, what are you doing? Within his sea of consciousness, the sword elder panicked. He couldn't understand what Nie Tian was doing. Trust me, Nie Tian didn't explain too much and only uttered 3 words in a deep voice. Then his speed increased. The proud sword heaven wings appeared on his back, and he dashed forward like a shooting star. In midair, Nie Tian's body suddenly flashed with a layer of red light. Scarlet flames ignited around him as he activated the ultimate fire Scarlet Heaven armor. Bypassing the center of the Black Lotus, Nie Tian passed through the strange Black Lotus. In the blink of an eye, he was only a few hundred meters away from Yu Shuang. Suddenly, Yu Shuang seemed to think of something and her face tensed. But it was too late. Nie Tian's eyes flashed, and a terrifying spiritual deterrent rolled out. Invisible spiritual waves flashed through the void. Yu Shuang screamed. She immediately fell into a daze, her mind under Nie Tian's control. She had always been on guard against Nie Tian's spiritual attacks, but she hadn't expected them to be so terrifying. Within a few hundred meters, she couldn't resist them at all. Starry sky, I was the second awakening of the galaxy. Now that the power of 100 billion stars in the second galaxy had been fully awakened, the power of the starry sky, I was beginning to take shape. Nie Tian had bet everything on this attack, so even if Yu Shuang was prepared, she would still be shocked by the absolute tremor. Hellfire Crucible. Seeing Yu Shuang's stunned expression, Nie Tian didn't hesitate. He knew that, given her strength, the absolute tremor would only last for a moment. But as soon as his voice faded, he realized that the Hellfire Crucible hadn't appeared. Oh no, I don't have enough star power. Nie Tian exclaimed as his expression flickered. He had used a large amount of star power to activate the sword runes and had just opened Starry Sky Eye. Now that he wanted to use the Hellfire Crucible, he had used up all his star power. At that moment, Nie Tian's eyes widened. He knew that if he didn't kill Yu Shuang now, once she woke up, it would be his doomsday. The situation was critical. Nie Tian's brain was working furiously. But at that moment, something strange happened. Black-feathered demon flame. A crazy roar rang out in the sky. Then, a black sword light whistled through the air, carrying with it a power that could tear everything apart. Lin Feng. Nie Tian raised his head and looked at the figure that had suddenly appeared. His whole body shook. At the most critical moment, Lin Feng had actually made a move. Nie Tian. A panicked voice rang out behind Lin Feng. It was Lin Feng. Lin Feng didn't know why, either. He was in the middle of a bitter battle with Lin Feng, but Lin Feng had suddenly given up on him to attack the other side. Oh no! Nie Tian's pupils constricted, but he still didn't give up. A long sword appeared in his hand, but it stopped in midair. He suddenly realized that Lin Feng's target wasn't him, but Yu Shuang. Lin Feng's deadly attack wasn't aimed at Nie Tian, but at Yu Shuang. Nie Tian's eyes widened. He also didn't know why Lin Feng would change sides at the most critical moment. Chapter 9:39. Lin Feng's sword slashed down from the sky, his eyes filled with the most resolute killing intent. The black sword aura swept past Yu Shuang. She regained her senses in an instant, but the black sword aura was already in front of her. Yu Shuang's pupils constricted, revealing great fear. She wanted to resist, but it was too late. Bang! With a muffled sound, The black sword aura pierced through Yu Rushuang's body, spraying blood into the sky. The gigantic, demonic lotus in the sky abruptly trembled, and the gigantic black petals actually shattered into pieces. Lin Feng seemed to have been waiting for the best opportunity to kill in one blow. Nie Tian stood in the sky, looking at Lin Feng with a puzzled expression. He hadn't expected the latter to attack Yu Rushuang at the most critical moment. Lin Feng had just shouted the name of Mingjian Villa, which seemed to have something to do with the Sky Demon cult. Yu Rushuang's body trembled. The sudden sword attack had seriously injured her, and her life was in danger. Her body could no longer bear the blood demon energy inside her, and it was slowly being devoured. Why? Yu Rushuang looked at Lin Feng in astonishment. 16 years ago, Mingjian Villa lost 683 lives. This is why. Lin Feng held the dragon roar black-feathered sword in his hand, looking like a demon god as he stood in the sky. Mingjian Villa. Yu Rushuang mustered all the strength in her body to say the name, her voice trembling. Then, with a burst of energy that she didn't know she had, she roared. Back when we destroyed the Mingjian Villa, the Villa Master, Lin Lang, escaped with 2 children. You were one of them, weren't you? Mingjian Villa had once been a first-rate faction comparable to Sky Sword Pavilion, but it had been destroyed a dozen years ago. So it was the Sky Demon cult's doing. Yes. Lin Feng nodded solemnly, his expression indifferent. So that's how it is. Yu Rushuang's body trembled, and she coughed up a mouthful of blood, but she actually laughed. It seems that you joined the Sky Demon cult to wait for this moment for revenge. Who would have thought that I would die because of a moment of carelessness? Yu Rushuang didn't trust anyone easily, but she trusted Lin Feng. And it was this careless trust that had cost her life. Nie Tian shook his head slightly as he listened from the side. Yu Rushuang's death at Lin Feng's hands seemed accidental, but it was inevitable. Yu Rushuang was too vicious and merciless. She had killed too many people and made too many enemies. Even if there was no Lin Feng today, there would definitely be Zhang Feng or Wang Feng in the future. In a way, Yu Rushuang had died because of her ruthlessness. Just like the Black Moon Empire, there was absolutely no need for her to massacre the Alchemist Guild and the Blacksmith Guild, but she still did it. These 2 guilds were not to be trifled with. Even if she did not take revenge now, she would definitely not let it go in the future. Lin Feng. Lin Feng, you really didn't let me down. There was no sorrow in Yu Rushuang's eyes. Instead, she smiled strangely. Bang! With that, Yu Rushuang's body could no longer bear the power of the blood demon. Her body was torn apart and turned into a bloody light. Lin Feng stared at the bloody light without any expression on his face. You? At that moment, Lin Feng landed on the ground. He wanted to say something, but he swallowed his words. You are the other one of the 2 children that the leader of the Mingjian mountain village, Lin Lang, saved. Lin Feng looked at Lin Feng coldly and said emotionlessly. After that, his silhouette flickered and he left. That's... Lin Feng looked at the silhouette of the man and was surprised. Nie Tian was stupefied. So Lin Feng and Lin Feng were both from the Mingjian mountain village, but he didn't know if they were related by blood. Nie Tian had a feeling that the 2 of them were brothers. At that moment, Nie Tian didn't have time to think too much. He immediately looked at the blood demon altar. He checked with his godly awareness and was surprised. The blood demon's chi had disappeared. It seemed like it had escaped. The blood demon has already left, said Mr. Jian in Lin Feng's mind. All right. Nie Tian nodded and said to Lin Feng, Lin Feng, take Jian Shun and leave. I need to find someone. Ever since Nie Tian and the others had entered Devamara Palace, they hadn't seen anyone from Devamara Palace. Nie Tian was a bit worried, but he had to find Rui Qinyu first. Then he could leave Devamara Palace. Lin Feng nodded. Immediately after, he took Jinshin with him. Nie Tian immediately destroyed the blood demon altar and went to the main hall of Devamara Palace. Rui Qinyu was trapped in the ice and snowstone. Lin Feng couldn't sense her. Nie Tian opened his starry sky eyes, which allowed him to see everything within 100 meters. Very quickly, he arrived at a hidden room. He opened the door and saw a beautiful silhouette lying on a crystal stone. It was Rui Qinyu. Nietian arrived next to Rui Qinyu. He was so close to her that he could sense her chi. After dealing with Devamara Palace, I have to go to Domain Ice as soon as possible, whispered Nietian while looking at Rui Qinyu. The ice and snow stone was produced in Domain Ice. Maybe he could find a way to break it there. Huh. At that moment, Mr. Jian was surprised. Mr. Jian, Nietian suddenly thought of something. He looked happy and asked, "Do you know how to break the ice and snow stone?" "I don't know," said Mr. Jian while shaking his head. "This little girl has the legendary 9-colored pupils." Nietian slightly shook his head. So Mr. Jian knew that Rui Qinyu had the 9-colored pupils. That's why he was surprised. "Nietian, is this little girl your wife?" The sword elder seemed to have sensed something and suddenly asked. "She's not. I already have a fiancé." Nietian's face turned slightly red as he hurriedly explained. Mr. Jian laughed and didn't say anything else. Nietian took Rui Qinyu and left immediately. He was worried that the people of Sky Sword Pavilion had already started fighting with the people of Sky Demon Cult. Nietian left the sword catacomb. The scene outside made him frown. There were countless corpses on the ground. "Oh no!" cried Nietian. It seemed that Yu Shuang had planned everything. She had lured Nietian and the others into Sky Demon Palace, and then sent others to destroy Sky Sword Pavilion. However, she didn't expect that she would die at Lin Feng's hands. When Nietian arrived at Sky Sword Pavilion, the battle had reached its climax. Countless followers of Sky Demon Cult were rushing towards Sky Sword Hall, while Luling Yun and the others were defending. "Humph!" Nietianling sneered. His eyes were full of killing intent. He turned into a ray of light and rushed over. The sword intent around him was wild. Everywhere he passed, there were wails of ghosts and howls of wolves. With Nietian's current strength, these people of Sky Demon Cult were no match for him. Like a tiger in a flock of sheep, Nietian directly broke through the attacks of the people of Sky Demon Cult. Chapter 940. In the Celestial Sword Palace, Luling Yun was seriously injured. Wang Yiping's sword had pierced through his chest. "Luling Yun, your position as Heaven Sword Pavilion Master should have been replaced a long time ago." Wang Yiping roared arrogantly. She wanted to finish Luling Yun off with another strike. Luling Yun looked glum. He hadn't thought that Wang Yiping would be so strong. She was even stronger than him. Luling Yun wasn't afraid of this brother who had gone through life and death with him. He only felt pain. Dying. Just at this moment, a cold voice rang out. Shortly after, a vast and mighty sword aura blossomed in the sky. A gigantic sword shadow whistled over, as majestic as a mountain. Wang Yiping sensed the terrifying killing intent. He turned around and saw Nietian's face. His eyes were filled with terror. In his opinion, Nietian should have died in Celestial Demon Palace. How could he appear here? Nietian had come out of Celestial Demon Palace, which meant that Yu Shuang had failed. Boom! However, Nietian didn't give Wang Yiping any time to think. His terrifying sword slashed through the air, and Wang Yiping died on the spot. On the other side, a horrible shriek spread in the air. An old man in gray clothes had been pierced through by Lin Feng's sword. That old man was another vice head of the Celestial Demon Cult. In the blink of an eye, 2 vice heads had died. The army of the Celestial Demon Cult was defeated and started fleeing in all directions. The sword cultivators of Celestial Sword Pavilion had their morale boosted. They chased after them like crazy, and the scene turned into a bloody massacre. That was the terrifying thing about strong cultivators. They could change the entire situation in the blink of an eye. Nietian didn't care too much about it. He just coldly looked at everything in front of him. Winner takes all. This was how cruel the world was. If he and Lin Feng hadn't appeared, the people who would have been killed would have been the people of Celestial Sword Pavilion. In a flash, most of the people of the Celestial Demon Cult were killed. Only a few managed to escape. Nietian and the others arrived at the Heavenly Sword Hall. Jian Shun had already woken up, but his body was still very weak. It seemed that he would need a long period of seclusion to fully recover. "Brat, you're already a few thousand years old, monster." Can't you be a bit more steady in the future? The sword elder scolded him in a bad mood, but his words were filled with concern. In the next few days, Luling Yun sent people into the demonic palace to destroy it and find many good things. Xian Xiu rescued Xian Tianluo from the heavenly devil palace, but the latter's Yuan Meridian and Yuan Spirit had already been destroyed, so he could only be an ordinary person in the future. Xian Zhao's death made Nie Tian feel a little ashamed. However, Xian Tianluo and Xian Xiu did not say anything. Xian Xiu had seen with his own eyes what Xian Xiao had become. That state was worse than death. Perhaps death was a form of release for Xian Xiao. Xian Xiu, Yu Jiao, and the others left the Heavenly Sword Pavilion. Nie Tian asked Han Tian to return with Yu Jiao. The Black Moon Empire was very unstable, and it could no longer be ruled by the Xian family. In the following period of time, Nie Tian cultivated in seclusion in the Heavenly Sword Pavilion. He had to wait for Imo, Rushi, and the others to come, and he urgently needed to comprehend the power of the sword pattern. The power of the sword pattern is indeed terrifying. In the room, Nie Tian stood up with a look of joy on his face. He had already begun to gradually master the power of the sword pattern, and he found that the power of the sword pattern not only improved his strength, but also the speed of his cultivation was very fast. In just over half a month, Nie Tian's strength had risen from the 4th tier of the Heaven Realm to the 5th tier of the Heaven Realm. With the strength of the 5th tier of the Heaven Realm and the newly comprehended power of the sword pattern, Nie Tian was now confident that he could fight experts like Yu Shuang and Jianshan head-on. At this time, the Corpse Demon King had also successfully refined the Soul Slave. This is the Soul Slave you refined. Nie Tian looked at the fireman in the furnace of hell and could not help but frown. The Corpse Demon King chuckled and said, "Master, this guy's soul power is too strong. I have no choice but to temporarily use the Starry Sky Sacred Flame to suppress his soul power. Right now, he's like a newborn baby and does not know anything." Nie Tian's face darkened. Although the soul slave refined from the soul clone of the 9th tier Heaven Emperor expert, Zhu Qinxiu, still looked like Zhu Qinxiu, his eyes were extremely clear, without any impurities. But this was also good. Nie Tian could teach him everything again. After thinking for a while, Nie Tian decided to change the name of the soul slave from Zhu Qinxiu to Nie Qiu. If Zhu Qinxiu, an elder of the Juyin God Palace, knew that Nie Tian had refined his soul clone into a soul slave and changed its name, who knew what expression he would have? It would definitely be ugly. Corpse Demon King, how's Nie Qiu's strength? Nie Tian was most concerned about the soul slave's strength right now. He remembered that when Nie Qiu descended back then, his strength was 9th tier Heaven Emperor on the surface, but his true combat power was only around 2nd tier Heaven Emperor. Hence, that was why he was defeated by Nie Tian, who consumed the Qilin's tier. Should have 1st tier Heaven Emperor strength, the Corpse Demon King said with a chuckle. 1st tier Heaven Emperor? Nie Tian was stunned and could not help swallowing his saliva. 1st tier Heaven Emperor strength. This was not very terrifying strength. But in the Sumeru world, this was absolutely the peak of the peak. One had to know that the strength of the Sumeru 4th peak was merely 9th tier Heaven being. Nie Qiu's strength was actually 1st tier Heaven Emperor. This also meant that Nie Tian could roam the entire Sumeru world unhindered just by relying on the strength of this soul slave. Master, there's something I have to remind you. At this time, the Corpse Demon King was rather worried and said, "This soul slave's soul strength itself is too strong. Furthermore, it's very berserk, so it can't be used casually. If it agitates the berserk murderous nature within his soul, it's very easy to lose control." Nie Tian was taken aback once more. The Corpse Demon King's words directly splashed cold water on him. With Nie Qiu's strength, if he lost control, it would simply be a catastrophe for the Sumeru world. And suddenly, Elder Sword's voice also sounded out and said, "This soul slave isn't perfect. It's mainly because the main body's soul strength is too strong and can't be completely erased. Once he loses control, He'll become a murderous demon. In this Sumeru world, no one can control him. Yes, the corpse demon king knew Elder Sword's identity and behaved very respectfully. Elder Sword, do you have a way to thoroughly erase his original soul strength? Nyetian saw Elder Sword speak. His gaze flickered, and he asked, Yes. The Sword Elder nodded with a smile. He gave a positive answer and said, I can use the power of the sword runes in your body to slowly erase his original soul force. However, this will take a few months or even longer. Moreover, it may affect your cultivation speed. Are you willing? Nyetian's gaze turned intent. Thinking for a bit, he did not hesitate much and said, No problem. Even though it expended some sword mark power and his cultivation speed decreased a little, Nyetian did not care about these. To be able to obtain a first-level Heavenly Emperor Soul Slave was very worth it. Nyetian. Right at this time, a voice sounded out outside the room. Chapter 941. During this time, Nyetian had been busy cultivating and didn't pay attention to the siblings. After all, the two of them had come out of the wind and cloud forbidden land because of him. Nyetian felt that it was necessary to keep an eye on them. Lady Zi-chun. Nyetian walked out of the room and saw Ni Zi-chun and Ni jamming. Nyetian, we're leaving. Ni Zi-chun didn't beat around the bush. Leave. Nyetian was taken aback. Then, he asked, Where are you going? Ni Zi-chun and Ni jamming weren't strong, and they didn't have much experience. If they left just like that, he wouldn't be at ease. 10,000 Demon Dragon Abyss, Ni Zi-chun said coldly. Demon Abyss? Nyetian was astonished and almost screamed. It would be better if the Ni siblings went to other places, but it was too dangerous for them to go to the 10,000 Demons Dragon Abyss. Sister, do we have to go to Demon Abyss? Ni jamming couldn't help but ask. He didn't want to leave. Yes. Ni Zi-chun nodded. Her eyes were determined. She had obviously made up her mind. This time, she was only here to greet Nyetian. Nyetian's eyes flickered. He had told Ni Zi-chun about Demon Abyss last time and remembered that Ni Zi-chun's expression was unnatural. Did Ni Zi-chun discover something and wanted to go to Demon Abyss to confirm it? When do you plan to leave? Nyetian asked. He knew that he couldn't persuade Ni Zi-chun anymore. Now, Ni Zi-chun replied. Actually, she had already made up her mind. She just didn't say it. She had indeed discovered a big secret from the dragon ring Nyetian had given her. This secret was too big. She had to go to Demon Abyss. Now, Nyetian didn't expect Ni Zi-chun to leave in such a hurry. Originally, Nyetian had planned to ask Ni Zi-chun to wait until he returned from the domain of endless snow. However, from the look of it, that was no longer possible. You don't have to worry. We have the ability to protect ourselves, and we found a companion, Ni Zi-chun said calmly, knowing Nyetian's hesitation. All right, Nyetian could only nod. He could not stop Ni Zi-chun, and Rui Qinyu's situation was urgent. In another 2 months, the Forbidden Ice Stone's Desolation Forbidden Power would take effect. Brother Nya. At that moment, a familiar voice emerged and Lin Feng appeared. Nyetian was stupefied, but immediately understood. Ni Zi-chun was talking about Lin Feng. Nyetian hadn't expected Lin Feng to be so close to the Ni siblings. But this way, he was much more at ease. Lin Feng was very strong. As long as they didn't encounter strong cultivators from the Shumi world, he could protect them. Nyetian and Lin Feng talked for a while and asked the latter to protect Ni Zi-chun and Ni Jianming. Nyetian didn't tell Lin Feng about Ni Zi-chun and Ni Jianming's real identities. That was Ni Zi-chun and Ni Jianming's business. After a while, the three figures left together. Nyetian. At this time, the Sword Elder's voice suddenly sounded. His voice was trembling as if he was terrified. Sword Elder, are you all right? Nyetian was stunned for a moment and asked, How did I? Mr. Jian's voice was shaking. Did I sense the Xianlong bestial saint's qi from that little boy? Yes. Nyetian didn't find Mr. Jian's reaction strange. Ni Jianming had recognized the ink dragon sword before. Since Mr. Jian had already sensed it, Tian didn't hide it and told him about Ni Jianming's identity. He really is the reincarnation of the Xianlong bestial saint. Mr. Jian was stupefied for a while and finally reacted. Mr. Jian, do you know the Xianlong bestial saint? Asked Tian when he saw Mr. Jian's reaction. Sort of, said Mr. Jian in a solemn way. He seemed to remember many things, but he didn't continue talking. Mr. Jian didn't explain too much, so Tian didn't ask too much. Instead, he asked, Mr. Jian, what kind of race is the Blood Demon clan? Tian was still worried that the escaped Blood Demon Spirit Slaughtering clan would become a threat. Blood Demon clan. Mr. Jian pondered for a while and said, one of the 12 ancient demon clans. They don't have a body, but a half-soul body. They have to devour the souls of other warriors or live in the souls of other warriors in order to survive. Moreover, the Blood Demon clan has high requirements for souls. Ordinary warrior souls are not good enough. Only warriors with the power of bloodlines are suitable for the Blood Demon clan. I see. Tian's eyes narrowed. He had never heard of such a strange clan. No wonder the Blood Demon Spirit Slaughtering clan made a deal with Yu Shuang and wanted to devour Yujin's soul. The Blood Demon Spirit Slaughtering clan must have lived in Yujin's soul, but hadn't been able to completely devour her soul. However, after the destruction of Heavenly Devil Palace, Eugene had not been found. Tian was worried that Yujin's soul had been devoured by the Blood Demon Spirit Slaughtering clan. However, Tian didn't have time to worry about Eugene. He planned to go to the Mystic Moon Empire first to see if there was any news of Mo Rushi and the others. If there was no news, he would return to the 3,000 small worlds. After that, he would go to the Snow Domain ice field. Having made up his mind, Tian didn't delay any longer. He immediately went to the Heavenly Sword Hall and bid farewell to Lu Lingyun and the others. Boom! However, at that moment, a huge explosion sounded in the sky. Then, a spatial crack appeared in the sky, as if the sky had been torn apart. Tian's eyebrows furrowed as he suddenly thought of something and had a bad premonition. He could feel the aura of the teleportation formation from the spatial crack. It was obvious that someone had come from the Heaven Realm. Heaven Realm? Tian's eyes trembled violently. The first thought that came to his mind was that his identity had been exposed. Previously, when the Divine Sword recognized him as its master, the Ink Jade Dragon Sword's sword intent was too terrifying. It soared into the sky and broke through the restrictions of the laws of space. At that time, Tian had his suspicions. However, he was just hoping for a fluke. Now, it seemed that he was too optimistic. What is that? The people of Heavenly Sword Pavilion exclaimed when they saw this spatial crack in the sky. Many people had a look of horror in their eyes. They had no idea what was happening. Oh no! Tian's heart sank. If it was someone from the Heaven Realm, they would definitely come for him. If things went wrong, Heavenly Sword Pavilion would also be in trouble. Heavenly Sword Pavilion was not a weak force in the Sumeru world. However, in front of someone from the Heaven Realm, it was nothing. Thinking of this, Tian took a step forward and soared into the sky. He actually dashed towards a spatial crack. With a strike of the sword, a majestic sword will spread out like a tide, condensing into a huge sword shadow in the void, blasting towards the crack in the space. Chapter 942. Seeing the space-time spiritual array appearing in the spatial crack, everyone on the ground couldn't help but tremble, and many people's backs were dripping with cold sweat. These people would never have thought that one day they would see someone from the Heaven Realm. Although the three figures in the spiritual array had restrained their aura, they gave off a kind of majesty that people didn't dare to look up to. Tian was in midair, and when he saw the teleportation spiritual array appear, his eyes narrowed slightly, and he rushed over even more crazily. Boom! The sword light whizzed past and bombarded the spiritual array. The huge spiritual array shook slightly, but it wasn't destroyed. The leader of the spiritual array was a middle-aged man. He was stunned suddenly, and his gloomy eyes looked at Tian. His whole body was full of killing intent, and suddenly a mighty force rolled out. Buzz! The whole space was affected by the force, and, with a roar, it was as if the space itself had become a weapon, and it pressed towards Nyetian. The power of law. Nyetian frowned suddenly. The person who came was really someone from the Heaven Realm, and he was a Heavenly Emperor realm expert. He directly used the power of law. What a terrifying force! The crowd on the ground felt a vast, mighty force descending from the void, as if it was going to destroy the world, and they couldn't help but show a look of horror. This is... Lu Lingyun and the others also came out at this moment, and their eyes trembled deeply when they felt the power in the space. This kind of power was clearly released by a Heavenly Emperor realm expert. Heaven's shrouding totem, open. Nyetian's eyes suddenly shrank, and a huge starlight emerged behind him, filling the sky into a large net, covering the whole world, and at the same time, wrapping the teleportation spiritual array. Bang! A muffled sound, and a huge palm force descended. Nyetian's body lit up with dragon scales, and he forcibly withstood the blow. His figure swayed, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. However, he wasn't seriously injured, and his complexion was still normal. Huh? The newcomer was taken aback, but in the next moment, he understood something. He laughed mockingly and said, "Brat, I didn't expect you to know how to use spirit formations. It seems that not all martial artists of the Shumi world are trash." The reason why Nyetian was able to withstand that person's attack was because he had immediately activated the sky shrouding barrier, greatly weakening the opponent's strength. Otherwise, he would not have been able to withstand a frontal attack from a Heavenly Emperor powerhouse. It's this sword intent. Behind the middle-aged man, a young man in black said, "Lord Wei, this is the person we want to kill." "It's this kid?" The middle-aged man, Wei Shuchun, was slightly taken aback, but his eyes were filled with strong disdain. He said, "A mere trash in the 5th level of the Heaven Realm is worth this Lord's trip. I really don't know what he's capable of to make Lord Zhou so nervous. Lord Wei, this kid's enchantment has some problems. Furthermore, to be able to make Lord Zhou pay attention to him, he's definitely not simple. We mustn't be careless." The young man in black was called Zhang Yuan. Clearly, he was more cautious than Wei Shuchen. Nyetian looked at the 3 people in front of him, his heart involuntarily trembling. Wei Shuchen's strength was a 1st-level Heavenly Emperor, while the other 2 people's strengths were 9th-level Heaven Realm. These 3 people's strengths, under normal circumstances, any one of them was sufficient to insta-kill him. Fortunately, he used the sky shrouding barrier to seal off a stretch of heaven and earth when the 3 people just appeared. Currently, the 3 people's strengths were all suppressed by the barrier. At most, they only had 6th or 7th level Heaven Realm strength. Humph! Merely an enchantment that suppresses strength. Watch me break it. Right at this time, that martial artist who had not spoken all along suddenly laughed coldly. Immediately after, he directly attacked. Rumble. A palm striking out. A terrifying palm force bombarded on the barrier. The surrounding several tens of thousands of meters trembled violently. But the sky shrouding barrier was actually completely unscathed. Amen? Wei Shuchen trio was taken aback at the same time, not expecting that the sky shrouding barrier was so horrifying to actually be able to resist the tremendous palm force. "You guys are from the Heavenly Realm?" Nyetian heaved a sigh in relief inwardly. As long as the sky shrouding barrier was not broken, he would have the strength to fight. Just now, the 3 people were unable to break the barrier before it was laid down. Now, wanting to break the barrier from the inside was very difficult. Hearing these 3 people's conversation, they did not know Nyetian's identity. They only came to the spatial world to kill a person and did not know that the person they wanted to kill was the Heavenly Realm's former #1 war god. But Nyetian could also figure out, even if he used his toes, to think that these people must be sent by Luo Chunhun. Even if it was not Luo Chunhun himself who assigned it, it must also be under Luo Chunhuan's instructions. Looks like the news that he was still alive was already leaked. The 3 people in front of him were merely the first batch of killers. If he could kill these 3 people, there would be even more terrifying enemies coming next. Brat, you are quite knowledgeable to know that we are from the heavenly realm. Wei Shuchen's eyes were filled with disdain. He did not put Nye Tian in his eyes at all. He said in a cold tone, "If you're sensible, then surrender. Maybe this lord will leave you with a whole corpse. If you're not sensible, I will definitely make sure you die without a corpse." As the cold voice fell, a strong killing intent spread out like a solid substance, filling the air with killing intent. Wei Shuchen did not know why the people behind him wanted to kill Nye Tian, but he knew that Nye Tian must die. Then let's do it. After confirming the identity of the people, Nye Tian did not waste any more words. He had to kill the 3 people in front of him before the sky-shrouding barrier disappeared. Otherwise, it would be terrible. "Rennie Hong, you break the barrier. Zhang Yuan, let's do it." Wei Shuchen smiled cold. As soon as his voice fell, his figure directly pressed over. Suddenly, a mighty aura rolled over like a tsunami, giving people a suffocating sense of oppression. Nye Tian did not dare to be careless. The long sword in his hand broke through the air, and he used one of the 3 extreme styles of the AO sword art: Sword Hearts and Moon. Puff! A huge sword intent blasted out. The sky-shrouding barrier increased Nye Tian's strength, but under his sword, he could not exert the power at all. It was directly absorbed by Wei Shuchen. Water attribute. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He immediately understood that Wei Shuchen was a water attribute martial artist. There was a layer of water shield around him. His sword intent could not break the opponent's water shield. "Brat, you can suppress my strength, but you can't suppress my primordial spirit." Wei Shuchen laughed wildly. A long sword condensed from water mist appeared in his hand. Water convergence sword. Nye Tian's eyes sank again. He did not expect Wei Shuchen to also be a swordsman. Moreover, his swordsmanship strength had reached the peak of sword soul. "Brat, obediently accept your death." On the other side, a roar sounded. It was Zhang Yuan. This person was also a swordsman. A long sword burning with flames appeared in his hand. Green fire sword. At the same time, another martial artist, Ren Yihong, emitted a faint light. It was the power of the seal. He wanted to use the power of the seal to break the sky-shrouding barrier. Nye Tian's face sank. He had to quickly get rid of Wei Shuchen and Zhang Yuan. Otherwise, if Ren Yihong broke the sky-shrouding barrier, he would no longer have any strength to resist. Water convergence kill. Green fire cut. Chapter 943. High up in the sky, the crack in space had already disappeared. Wei Shuchen and the other 2 were trapped in the barrier. Wei Shuchen and Zhang Yuan attacked at the same time, wanting to kill Nye Tian in one move. The 2 sword essences of water and fire suddenly arrived. One was scorching hot, the other was surging. The 2 of them attacked with great tacit understanding. They froze the space, leaving Nye Tian no room to retreat. He could only face them head-on. "Be careful." The crowd on the ground saw that Nye Tian was in danger and exclaimed. After the incident with the heavenly demon cult, Nye Tian was already a hero in their eyes. Although they did not know why these Heaven Realm warriors would appear, no one wished for anything to happen to Nye Tian. Nye Tian was attacked by 2 people at the same time. His eyes were as calm as water, without the slightest fluctuation. 8 Desolation sword. In the next moment, his figure moved. Sword essence surged out from his body. The surrounding frozen space shook violently and was torn apart. Bang! Bang! 2 muffled sounds. Wei Shuchen and Zhang Yuan were forced to retreat at the same time. The 2 of them were stunned. They did not expect Nye Tian's strength to be so tyrannical. What a strange sword essence. The 2 of them were swordsmen. They could feel the terrifying power from Nye Tian's sword essence. It was like a suppressed beast. Once awakened, it would definitely be earth-shattering. Nye Tian forced the 2 of them back. However, he was also affected by the sword essence. 2 bloody wounds appeared on his body. He looked slightly embarrassed. However, he was very satisfied with the power of the sword pattern. It was completely out of his expectations. Although Wei Shuchen and Zhang Yuan's strength was suppressed, they were still above the 6th level of Heaven Realm. Moreover, they were both warriors at the pinnacle of Sword Soul. Their joint attack was broken by Nie Tian's sword. One could imagine how terrifying the sword pattern was. The crowd on the ground trembled violently. They were deeply shocked by Nie Tian's strength. At this moment, Lu Lingyun and the others appeared and stood in the void. Seeing Nie Tian's sword just now, Lu Lingyun was shocked. At this moment, he understood that the difference between him and Nie Tian was like heaven and earth. When he was defeated by Nie Tian, he was still very unconvinced. But now he was convinced. Boss! Jean de Bao's figure also appeared. When he saw Nie Tian fighting against 3 people from the Heaven Realm by himself, he could not help but reveal a worried expression. He had always trusted Nie Tian. No matter how terrifying the enemy was, he rarely worried about Nie Tian. But it was different this time. Nie Tian's opponents were martial artists from the Heaven Realm, 1 1st-level Heavenly Emperor, 2 9th-level Heaven Being. Such a lineup was enough to shock the entire Shumi world. Don't get close, Nie Tian growled, indicating that Jean de Bao should not get close to the barrier. Brat, you can't even protect yourself, yet you still have the mood to care about others? Wei Shuchan smiled coldly and stabbed out with her sword again. Mist seemed to appear in the air, and a cold aura spread out. Nie Tian seemed to hear the sound of waves ringing in his ears, deep and vast, shocking him. His body moved, and he struck out with his palm. Suddenly, there was a deafening clap of thunder, and the power of purple gold lightning rolled out, filling the entire sky-shrouding enchantment. Rumble! Lightning rolled and moved. The purple gold lightning was akin to an astonishing wave, crushing over with a loud bang. Wei Shuchan cried out in surprise, her figure retreating hastily, but she was still struck by the power of lightning. Crack, crack! A series of crisp cracking sounds out. The water-restraining shield around Wei Shuchan was actually blasted open by the power of lightning. Several deep bloody wounds appeared on her body. Lord Wei, Zhang Yuan could not help crying out in shock when he saw Wei Shuchan's hand. I'm fine. Wei Shuchan's gaze quivered, her face revealing a sinister look as she roared angrily. Stinking brat, this lord underestimated you, to actually be able to break even my water-restraining shield. The corners of Nie Tian's eyes twitched too. He was just testing out earlier. He did not expect that the power of lightning could actually really restrain Wei Shuchan's water-restraining shield. I'll kill you. Zhang Yuan was first stunned, then immediately gave a sinister roar. Massive flames rose up all over his body, setting the prairie ablaze into a sea of fire. A sword slashed out. An enormous fire snake rumbled over toward Nie Tian in midair. You're courting death. Nie Tian's eyes flashed with a frightening, killing intent. His body immediately trembled, and 12 giant light swords surged around his body. He could not wait any longer. The power of the heaven-shrouding boundary was slowly weakening. He had to strike with his life on the line. The 12 heaven-slaying sword formation was activated. Nie Tian's figure condensed in the sword formation, instantly absorbing the power of the sword formation. The sword absolute heaven slash down. The frightening sword actually caused the heaven-shrouding boundary to shake. Ah! Zhang Yuan screamed. The sword flames around his body seemed to feel a terrible threat and suddenly shrank. In the next moment, the life-threatening sword bombarded down. The huge sword shadow directly cut the sea of fire in half. The raging flames were like a tide, parting to both sides. Not good. Wei Shuchan saw this scene and was suddenly stunned, screaming. At the moment of desperation, Zhang Yuan desperately stabbed out with his sword. At the same time, his body slightly staggered. Swoosh! The sword shadow fell. In a flash of blood, Zhang Yuan's arm was directly cut off. Ah! My arm! A tragic howl sounded. Zhang Yuan could not help but retreat, unable to stand. What a strong force! Wei Shuchan was momentarily stunned, his expression stiff. Originally, he thought that Nie Tian was just an ant that he could crush easily. He did not expect the latter's strength to be so strong. Nie Tian's eyes turned cold and directly locked onto Wei Shuqian. Zhang Yuan had already lost the ability to fight, so it was Wei Shuqian's turn next. Lord Wei, the barrier is broken. At this moment, a joyful voice rang out. Ren Hong shouted, "Rumble!" Before he finished speaking, the strange power of the seal, surging above the heaven-shrouding totem, became violent. Then, with a loud bang, the heaven-shrouding boundary was directly broken. The moment the boundary was broken, Niet Tian's figure trembled slightly, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. "Brat, it's time for you to die." Wei Shuqian felt that the pressure from the boundary had disappeared. He immediately laughed, and a terrible, murderous intent appeared in his eyes. Oh no! Niet Tian's complexion was pale, secretly crying out in his heart. Although Zhang Yuan was seriously injured, Wei Shuqian's combat strength did not decrease. His strength recovered to first-level Heavenly Emperor. How could he resist? "Lord Wei, slaughter this punk and take revenge for me." Zhang Yuan roared fiercely, a vicious look on his face. "Okay." Wei Shuqian roared angrily, furious killing intent surging. Immediately, the void trembled. A terrifying pressure appeared. A water screen appeared in the space, the power of laws flowing inside. "Stinking brat, you've angered this lord." Wei Shuqian's eyes revealed a vicious intent as he hooted arrogantly. "Today, not only are you going to die, everyone present has to die." When the ruthless voice fell, everyone's hearts suddenly trembled, their faces revealing a tremendous look of horror. In Wei Shuqian's eyes, the spatial world's martial artists were all trash. If he wanted to kill, he would kill. As long as he felt carefree in his heart, it was fine. "Is that so?" Niet Tian's gaze fell slightly, a hint of resolve flashing across in his eyes. A crimson sea of fire appeared behind him. The hellfire furnace appeared.